Joe Rogan Podcast. Check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
Good to see you again, sir.
Good to see you too, man.
Good to see you again. These times of trouble and chaos.
Wild times.
Where leftists are lighting Teslas on fire and putting swastikas on them.
and that's the calmest they've been in years. Like, this is actually for them probably the best.
It's so weird how these people are so easy to wind up and get them to do what you want them to do. Just put a narrative out there. You're a good person if you go do this, and they just go run out and fucking cause chaos.
And it's the most. I mean, look, it's not like as much chaos as say like the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 or something. But the one about the test, it's like you're destroying electric cars,
which are mostly owned by liberals.
Yeah, like, but I thought you've been telling me for so long that this is going to save the world. Like, the importance on going green was that we're all going to die unless we do it. And now you're taking the most successful electric car company and trying to destroy them because for the crime of pointing out that maybe the $7 trillion that our federal government's spending has a wee bit of corruption in it. You know, like maybe we could cut some of that. It's so, I don't know. It's so, on every level, it's just so surreal.
It is surreal. It feels fake. It does. It genuinely feels like we're living in some sort of a stupid movie.
Yeah. Well, and it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder how controlled the whole thing is, you know. And I don't know. But there is a, do you remember, I think I sent it to you at the time, but there was like 4 years ago, there was a Time magazine piece about the 2020 election. It was like a real long article about, it was some, like the title was something like how the shadow government like stole. It wasn't exactly that, but it was like basically went through the real conspiracy of 2020, and they're writing it from the pro-conspiracy point of view. But they're, forget anything about like ballots or any of that stuff, which I don't, you know, even when you interviewed Trump, he didn't really have a good answer for that. You know,
No.
it's like, it was stolen. And you're like, well, how do you know it was stolen? It's like, it was stolen, you know?
Got the information?
Yeah, but what we do know, like the real conspiracy in broad daylight, that they just totally like tanked the economy, overhauled. Yeah, that's it. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election.
Saved.
And they go deep into like admitting so much about like the censorship on social media, the support of the riots and the protests. And what's amazing about it is it really is incredible, their ability to turn on and turn off the protest machine.
Well, it's just
Like,
money.
Yeah.
It's just money. There's a lot of people out there that have nothing to do. There are a bunch of, we were talking about it the other day. I was like, if I was 21 years old and someone said, hey, they're going to pay you $400 to go to a Kamala Harris rally, would you go? I'm like, fuck yeah. I'd go. I'd hold that sign up. I'd probably vote
When
for
I was
her.
21, you had me at $400. The conversation was over. It
It's
was like
over.
$400.
I heard you get $1,000 to go protest for Tesla.
Can I sneak in both of those? Can we do one?
Yeah, $1,400 in a day, dude. Nice.
Yeah, I was thrilled when I was 25 to make like $75 at the comic strip or something like that. So yeah, but also it's a, you know, it's like, and that's kind of like the whole CIA deep state game, is it's always moving around the margins. You know, like if there's, because like when I, you know, on the show I've talked about a bunch, like the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'd say like this was a US-backed coup against a democratically elected president, the response I'd get from people who disagreed with it would always be like, oh, you're denying the agency of the Ukrainian people? Because like, look at these pictures. There's all these Ukrainian people in the streets. And you're like, well, yeah, but the U.S. poured $100 million into that street protest. Like, you think that made a difference a little bit, you know? And so, like, it's not that there weren't real people there.
Sure.
But, man, you want to keep a protest going through the Ukrainian winter, and then all of a sudden you get $100 million, and now you got heat lamps and celebrities and concerts, and then you keep the whole thing going until the democratically elected president has to flee for his fucking life. And then what are you supposed to look at that? Oh, that was just an organic revolution? Like, no, it fucking wasn't. You know, this is D.C. overthrowing Putin's neighbor. And, you know, they don't like that detail because then it fucks up the whole unprovoked
people don't
narrative.
like that detail. They don't like the detail that there's many layers of subterfuge exchanging with each other. There's just so much money and so much influence, and they're so good at it. They've been doing it for so long that they can get Time Magazine to write an article saying how it's good.
Yeah, it's great.
It's good that we saved the 2020 election.
And by the way, I love I know your podcast with Mike Benz was phenomenal. That dude's great.
He's phenomenal. I've done a few with him now.
Yeah, he's great. But I'll tell you, I knew all that. He's right about all that USAID stuff, and I'll tell you, that was the whole thing. It's Scott Horton's book, Provoked, which is like the best book that's been written on the history of the build up to the war in Ukraine. And it's all in there, dude. If you want, it's all footnoted, but it's like, yeah, they're the ones pumping all this money in, and then they make it out like when you try to cut it, they're like, oh no, we were just helping some kids get on a school bus over here and overthrowing the democratically elected government in Ukraine. You know, like we did all of that. But
well, that's the beautiful thing about USAID. You know, it's like they had the money to do all this stuff. There's the money to do essentially whatever they want all over the world, and the way Mike Benz describes it as the stuff that's too dirty for the CIA.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so they can have plausible deniability too. Because like, what are you talking about?
Non-government organization.
Yeah, there you go. That's totally right. Yeah, exactly. It's like in the name. They might as well call it. They're like, we're not the CIA.
The good guys.
We're just George Soros's NGO, not the CIA at all. Totally removed. But also the thing is that, you know, when you look at like the actual money, because sometimes they'll kind of point out that they're like, oh, this is a very small percentage of the budget. And it's like, yeah.
It's tiny amount of money.
Well, right. It's a small
just
percentage
a few
of
$billion.
Our budget.
Yeah.
But our budget, I mean, I know the entire GDP of Russia is like $2 trillion. The entire economy. And I don't know what Ukraine is, but smaller than that. And we spend like between $6 and $7 trillion a year, just our government. So when you're talking about flooding in $100 million, flooding in a few billion, I think like it's like $5 or $6 billion since 91 we've put into Ukraine. That may not sound like that much money in the context of America, the biggest economy or the second biggest economy in the world. But politically, in a small country like Ukraine, that moves mountains. That changes the entire landscape when the world empire is pumping that type of money in.
What do you think the world looks like, though, if the United States doesn't do that? So if the United States doesn't, this is like the Mike Baker perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Like if the United States doesn't make friends with these dictators, if the United States doesn't put people who are sympathetic to our causes in power, China does, Russia does, it looks very bad for America all over the world. Things get dangerous.
It's almost always the war hawks rely on an unfalsifiable counterfactual. You know, so it's like, oh, but if we didn't do this and we ran the counterfactual, it would be this crazy other scenario that's somehow even worse than this.
Right.
Now, the problem with that, from my perspective, is number one, the factual scenario is like something like 4 to 5 million dead civilians over the last 25 years, entire nations destroyed, $8 trillion depleted from the U.S. Treasury, tens of thousands of our bravest young men blowing their brains out. So, you know, if you're relying on this unfalsifiable counterfactual, but it would have been worse if we hadn't fought a war in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya and Somalia and Yemen and all these places over the last years. Okay. I'd say the onus is on you to really have to demonstrate that and not just assert that it would be worse if we hadn't done this. But also, like, you know, we're going broke doing it. Like, we're $36 trillion in debt. We can't even afford it. And the idea that if we were to get out of the game of being the world empire, then, like, China would go, okay, great, now we get to destroy ourselves. And it just seems completely... It seems extremely unlikely that that would be the case. And also, you know, it's like people act like, okay, if we weren't doing this in Ukraine, then Vladimir Putin could do whatever he wanted to. Or if we weren't doing this, then China could do whatever they wanted to. But they've got adversaries all around them, too, who are richer than them. Maybe not in China's case, but certainly in Putin's case, richer than them, are opposed to them. All of Western Europe is not just a pushover. China has Japan and South Korea, and they've got their own... You know, the truth is that nobody has the power that the U.S. government has to do this shit. It's only like we're the ones who can do this. And it would just be a better world if we just didn't. Like, you just can't convince me that, like, if we just hadn't have fought the terror wars, like, which was totally a possibility. The whole war on terrorism could have been over by Christmas of 2001 with the special ops taking out the Al-Qaeda cells. They could have trapped Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora when they had him there. And they let him escape into Pakistan. Because, you know,
why do you think they did that?
Because they already had their eye on Baghdad. And, you know, if Osama bin Laden is caught, you don't get your bonus war. You know what I mean? He's got the whole war propaganda for invading Afghanistan. It wasn't, everyone remembers WMDs, but it wasn't just that claim. It was the claim which Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and all the neocons pushed real hard, was that he was in on 9/11. Now, this totally fell apart because it was never true, and they knew it wasn't true. But the claim was he's got these weapons, and he could hand them off to the terrorists, and then, you know, what was the Condoleezza Rice line was like, we don't want the warning to be in the form of a mushroom cloud or something like that.
Yeah.
Like the fear was they're going to nuke Kansas or whatever. As soon as Saddam Hussein gives the weapons he doesn't have to the terrorists he's not friends with. But if they caught Osama bin Laden, I think that would have destroyed the whole 7 wars in 5 years.
It's the Wesley
strategy.
Clark strategy.
Ooh,
Yeah.
You want to hear something else on the Wesley Clark thing? This is new. Piers Morgan, say what you will about him, he hosted a debate between, which I love doing the show, I'm not trashing it, but it's a circus. But
It is a circus.
Yes.
I think he's very smart.
Oh, he's a genius, dude.
That circus is fucking a lot of people lining up.
Dude, he figured out, and you got to give him so much credit because he's probably the only one from like the old guard of corporate media who figured it out. He went, okay, I see where we are.
Yes.
I see what's going on, and I know what people want to see happen.
Tucker figured it out too, but in a different way.
Tucker is actually, yes. Tucker's the one who really figured it out.
Basically doing this kind of a show.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
he's
I think
basically doing long form podcast.
Well, look.
But with people who sucked Obama's dick.
Sometimes.
And other various experts.
And other guests.
And other really,
it's
really.
Not only that.
Yeah, really amazing people.
Maybe 10% of the coverage is about who sucked Obama's dick.
Did you see that physician who was on the other day that was talking about all the cancer rises?
Yeah.
They're seeing cancer.
I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw a few clips from it. It's very interesting.
Crazy. They're seeing pancreatic cancer in kids, little kids, which is just unheard of. He was saying that in all of his career, he had never seen pancreatic cancer in a child before.
Right.
And now they're seeing it.
Well, they used to call type 2 diabetes adult onset diabetes.
Right.
Because it was like, kids don't get it. It was like unheard of.
Right.
And now it's like all over the place.
Right.
I saw that thing. I saw it because you posted it, but the Kaylee Means.
Yes.
Wasn't
it fucking amazing?
Oh, so great.
Wasn't
dude.
it fucking amazing? It's just amazing that they're arguing against this.
Well, there's like no argument. And like I'm far from, I don't really understand the shit that well. But you go, okay, it's crazy that Bobby Kennedy is overhauling this whole thing and cutting all this. And you're like, okay, we spend more on health than any other nation in the world by far.
And we're
the
sicker.
sickest.
Yeah.
You're telling me there should, and your position here, it just like exposes that the entire media, it's like your position here is to get in between the regime and any threat to the regime.
Well, it's also radical change, and radical change causes controversy, and controversy is what they sell.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the media is going to sell that, and they're going to sell it on the angle of this is creating all sorts of problems, all sorts of people are losing their jobs, budgets are getting cut, people are getting fired, they're out on the street. It's that. Like that's just what they have to do that. That is what, if you're doing television media, newsprint media, subscription media, that's part of your job.
Well, but you could also get huge ratings by covering the controversy that is we spend more money and have the worst outcomes.
Can't do it because you get too much money from the pharmaceutical
that's
drug
right.
companies,
But that's
which
the point.
is also
Right.
Callie Means pointed that out.
Right. And I mean, look, if the media was just driven by ratings, they'd be doing shows on Jeffrey Epstein every day.
Every day.
I mean, because you'd be the number one show in cable news.
Exactly.
You could go, I'm going to talk about no other topic. Give me the 8 p.m. hour on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News or whatever, and I'll say, I'm just going to make my show about Jeffrey Epstein. That's every single day, that's all we're doing. I guarantee you I have the #1 show in cable news.
Right.
More people would want to watch
The
that.
Candace Owens show. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. And it's doing better numbers than any of the shows on cable news.
It's phenomenal. It's like they created a monster with her when they fired her from the Daily Wire. They created a monster.
Yeah, they sure did.
She can't be stopped.
Yeah. Oh, no. There's no stopping Candace Owens at
Because
this
she's
point.
hitting all the fucking third rails that no one wants to touch. She's got a 6-hour presentation on how Bridget Macron is a man. I mean, it's fucking 6 hours plus long.
I don't know if she's even kind of right about that.
I think she's right.
But she's got a lot of shit to say on it.
Bro, she would be getting sued right now instead of they're trying to bribe her. Instead of trying to give her money to shut the fuck up,
Yeah.
they would sue her.
Yeah. No, you're probably right about that.
I don't know if they are suing her. Have they tried to file anything? They probably have. They probably filed some bullshit lawsuits.
I'm sure she's dealing with
But
several.
I'm pretty sure she's right. I don't know. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
I think she's right. The whole thing stinks. And what stinks way worse than that giant distraction is that the #1 opponent for Macron just got sentenced to 4 years in jail and barred from political life for 5 years.
And the front runner, not just
Yeah,
the #1
the front
opponent, the
runner.
one who's winning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. It's what they try to do to Trump plus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they were able to take it further.
Yeah.
And then we'll see if there's the backlash the same way there was when they tried to do that to Trump. And it's just so, it's like there's some propaganda that's like almost too, it can't be successful propaganda. Like saying Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and is in bed with terrorists. That's good propaganda right there.
Right.
You know, right after 9/11, you could totally convince the average American that, okay, well, we can't let that stand. You know, in a post 9/11 world, we can't allow some Arab dictator to have nuclear weapons and he's friends with the terrorists and he's in on 9/11. Okay, but to say the propaganda is democracy is on the ballot while you're trying to arrest your opponent because he's winning in the polls.
Yeah.
Like, that's just too, like, it's too ridiculous. It's too on its
not only
face.
that, you have to say what you're arresting him for.
Yeah.
And then when people look at it, you're like, wait, Mar-a-Lago is worth how much?
Yeah.
Hold on. 34 what? Bookkeeping errors? They're misdemeanors? Where's the felony? There's no
And you're
felony.
saying-
Isn't it past the statute of limitations? It is.
And
But
you're
he's
like,
a
oh,
felon.
and nobody's ever been tried on this charge. This is a novel,
Yeah.
like a charge where it would be a misdemeanor, but you've ramped it up to
Both
a
of them
felony.
are novel.
And there's
The
no
real estate
victim.
thing, too.
And there's no victim involved. The banks
No victim.
themselves are telling you,
Right.
oh, we were happy to do business with Donald Trump. We'd do
And we
business
got
with him
paid.
again. Yeah.
We got our money back. There's no victims at all. And it's what every real estate agent does.
Yeah.
Every real estate salesman, every real estate investor,
Yeah,
they
it's just- right.
overvalue their properties. And your property is essentially only worth what people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it was so obvious that they were just weaponizing the legal system to go after him.
It's so crazy. Like they tried to say Mar-a-Lago was only worth $18 million.
Yeah. It's
It's like, dude, I would buy it right away. If someone told me you could get Mar-a-Lago for $18 million, I'd call my accountant right now. I'd go, don't lose this. Jump on this.
Dude, we do some banger
Wire
podcasts
money.
from Mar-a-Lago.
Wire the money. I'm moving to Florida.
Just bring down Austin. You go, everybody.
I'd have
pick
to
up.
have the call with Jamie. He'd be like, fuck.
Yeah. You go. You
We're
thought
moving to Florida, bitch.
you thought you had some uncomfortable summers here.
Do a
Get
lot
ready.
of golfing. A lot of golfing for you.
I lived in Florida for a while. I go back.
A lot of golfing.
All right.
I like some parts of Florida. Florida's fun.
Well, I don't think Trump's selling, and I don't think you're getting it for $18 million.
I'd like to live
So-
around alligators again. It's exciting. This episode is brought to you by The Farmer's Dog. We all want to do the best for our dogs, but there's a lot of mixed messaging out there, especially around dog food. Take kibble, for example. You don't have to do a lot of digging to learn that kibble is actually ultra processed. They put the words like premium on their bag next to pictures of real ingredients, but food doesn't end up as burnt down pellets without extreme processing. For decades, it was the default dog food, but not anymore. The Farmer's Dog is healthy food made with real meat and vegetables by people who care about what goes into your dog's body. The recipes are developed by board-certified nutritionists to be complete and balanced, and their food is made to the same safety standards as human food. It's lightly cooked to retain vital nutrients, and then it's pre-portioned to suit your dog's needs. So try the Farmer's Dog today and get 50% off your first box of healthy, freshly made food plus free shipping. Just go to thefarmersdog.com/Rogan, tap the banner, or visit this episode's page to learn more. The offer is for new customers only.
Yeah, just don't leave your kids unattended. But yeah, sure.
No. Give your kids a gun.
So let me tell you, because I forgot what I was saying. So Piers Morgan hosts a debate between Scott Horton and Wesley Clark.
Oh, interesting.
And so in this debate, one of the most interesting things, Wesley Clark just very casually said this, but it's like breaking news. But he said, so everybody, I assume we played it like a bunch of times on the show before, but Wesley Clark's a 4-star general. He was the head of NATO, and he told Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! That he saw in late 2001 what is become known as the 7 wars in 5 years, that the plan from the neocons in the government was that we were going to overthrow all these governments in the region in the next 5 years. Now, this plan obviously didn't end up happening in 5 years, but it's literally he names 7 countries and there's one to go. And that one, by the way, happens to be the one that Donald Trump is flirting with a war with right now, Iran. All the rest of them have happened.
Israeli news reported today that a strike on Iran is imminent.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah. No, we're very clearly moving toward this war, yet another catastrophic war. But so Wesley Clark gets asked about this in the debate, and he goes, it actually goes back much further than that. He goes, I first saw the plans in 1991, and it came from Paul Wolfowitz. Okay? So he goes, Paul Wolfowitz had these plans in 1991, and he took them to Brent Scowcroft, who was George H.W. Bush's national security advisor. So he takes them to them, and according to Wesley Clark, again, my source on this is a 4-star general. He says that Scowcroft went, we'll look at this after the election. 92 is the election year. They lose. Bill Clinton comes in, and he goes, and the plan kind of got killed. And then he said it was revived later in a study paid for by the Israelis. And that this was done, that Richard Pearl was really the one who brought it back to life, and that it was explicitly done because this is what they thought was necessary to protect Israel. And like, as I've mentioned to you before, now I don't know exactly what study he's referring to, but he said that's what he said. But I do know, as I've mentioned before on this, that anybody can go read The Clean Break. You could Google it right now. It's a clean break, a new strategy for securing the realm, which was a letter written by the guy he mentioned, Richard Pearl and David Wormser, to Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996. It was his first year when he came in as prime minister. And the whole thing is basically the clean break is a break from the peace process, a break from Oslo, because essentially Bill Clinton had gotten Yitzhak Rabin and Arafat to agree to start this 2-state solution process that should be loosely based around 67 borders. You got to finally give these Palestinians a state. You've been occupying them since 1967. You got to finally take your boot off their neck. And the clean break strategy was to go, listen, we got to get away from this whole idea of a Palestinian state and giving them land. And basically the thinking, the Yitzhak Rabin old school thinking on this, loosely speaking, it's a little more complicated, but basically they were like, look, we've been occupying the Palestinians for decades and decades now. The broader Arab world hates us over our treatment of the Palestinians. And so what you got to do is you have to make peace with the Palestinians so that you can get along with all these Arab states around you. That was kind of the thinking. And the clean break strategy was like, no. We're going to reverse that. Instead of making peace with the Palestinians so that we get along with the Arab states surrounding us, what we're going to do is we're going to overthrow all of those states. So we never have to make peace with the Palestinians. So we never have to have a 2-state solution. What we'll just do is we'll go overthrow all of these governments. Of course, Israel can't go overthrow all of these governments, but the U.S. can. And so after they had these plans in according to Wesley Clark in 91. We know about the clean break memo in 96. But after 9/11, that's when, by a terrible twist of fate and all this shit, the neocons are in power. They're in George W. Bush's, but there is no Brent Scowcroft. There is no H.W. There's nobody with like a little bit of wisdom at the top. It's Dick Cheney at the top, and then his sidekick, George W. Bush. And they go, so now we're going to move to get this.
Do you remember when Dick Cheney was in the bunker and W wasn't?
Yeah.
That's when we knew it was up.
Yeah, that'll tell you something.
We were informed that he was in the bunker, which is so crazy. Like, why would you say where the guy everyone's trying to kill is hiding?
Yeah.
Are you that confident in your bunker? And where's this bunker? What does it look like?
Yeah.
Can I get a fucking MTV Cribs tour of this bunker? What's going on with the bunker?
And look, man, and then just, and you could see now where there's like so much, there's such a rise in people being so fed up with this stuff. But the idea that we're now, I mean, look, just even with this whole Signal Gate shit that just happened. And it's like the real scandal there isn't even, I mean, I do think that Mike Waltz should be fired over this. It's a crazy screw up, and it's totally embarrassing.
How do you do that? I mean, I don't understand how you do that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Did you see his interview?
But it is a Signal chat between high-level government officials with classified information that's being discussed about war plans.
They would claim it's not classified, but it was information about an imminent attack that's about to take place.
Seems
like that would have to be.
How's that not classified?
How is that not?
If that's
top
not
secret?
classified, somebody else should get fired.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
At the end of the day, you have, I believe there was 18 people in that chat. Is that correct?
It's something probably around there. Yeah.
And no one goes over those things before you start addressing this information. If Jamie and I were talking shit about someone and we decided to do it on Signal, like, I would make sure that I didn't accidentally include my mom.
Yeah, right.
or a fucking reporter I know.
Or worse, like
or Trump himself. Whoopsies.
Or like your enemy, like the person who hates you the most.
How could you even have that guy in your contact list? Like, what's going on?
And also,
how do you accidentally include someone?
And the chat is, I mean, you can't overstate it. Short of the president of the United States, it's the most senior positions.
How do you not
your
have
CIA
someone
director
going over the list before you go live?
It's unbelievable. But I will say that like that, and perhaps there's another element. I mean, I don't know. I don't exactly know. I know in Trump's first term, the efforts from his own government to sabotage him were profound.
They were recording him.
Yeah, I mean, they were framing him for being a Russian spy, his own intelligence agencies. And so when you have a conversation like this get leaked to the most anti-Trump, propagandist at the Atlantic, it does raise some questions. Like,
big questions.
Was this done intentionally? Was it not?
Whoopsies.
Yeah, it's and I don't know if you saw, but Waltz he did Laura Ingram's show, like a couple days after it came out, and I mean his answers were just ridiculous.
What did he say?
It was like, she was like, so was this a staffer who messed up? Was someone? And he goes, no. I take full responsibility. But it was, I'm sure a lot of people have a contact with the wrong number saved in the contact or something like that.
Yeah, but you don't include that.
Yeah, but also
every time I get a new phone, one of the things I do is I go, oh wow, look at all the dead people on my phone.
Right.
I have a lot of dead people on my phone.
It's depressing, yeah.
It's so sad. But I have a lot of friends that I look through my contact list. I'm like, fuck, he's gone. Oh, fuck, he's gone. It's, and I have to make the decision. Do I delete them from my contact list? Generally, I don't. I like seeing their names.
Yeah, I know. I
have an old message from an old boss of mine. I keep the phone just because it's got the voicemail on it.
Yeah. No, I get that.
What I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you keep things that you don't need. I have contacts for people that are not just dead, but people that are dead to me. You know what I mean? Like, why do I have them in there?
Sure.
I don't talk to that guy anymore. Like, but you don't add him to a fucking chat list. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, right, and he was claiming like the idea of, which I'm sure has happened to all of us before, where like maybe you're taking down someo's number and you enter it wrong. So like, but that you wouldn't happen to hit the Atlantic journalist guy's number.
No, he had to be in contact with that guy.
Well, he claims he's never been in contact with him. He's never met him. He's never had a conversation.
So how did he include him in the chat?
By the way, then they found pictures of them together at like different events.
Oh,
so he's
it's
already
like
lying.
An Epstein deal.
Yeah, he's already lying. It's not, but I will say like that, it's like with a lot of these things, there was like, which we've talked about before on the show, but there's the leaked Victoria Nuland phone call where she's deciding who the new government in Ukraine will be.
Right, I've
like
heard
right
that.
around the time.
Yeah.
Okay, and then at one point she's furious at the European Union for not like moving in faster, and she goes at one point she goes, fuck the European Union, we'll just do it ourselves.
We should play that recording.
Sure,
because it's so crazy. But people should hear it.
But the point is that the scandal became that she said, fuck the EU. And you're like, no, dude, that's not the scandal here. That's not, they're like, isn't this undiplomatic of her saying, fuck the European Union? Like, that's the least of what's interesting about this.
Isn't it interesting that Congress people swear now?
It's very bizarre.
Everybody's swearing.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, fuck this, calling people retards. It's great.
Well, it's like they lost, they were trying to play that like Donald Trump's like down here and we're the dig, and then that didn't work. So they were like, I guess we'll just try to be like him too now.
Fuck Elon Musk. Yeah. Everybody's excited again. It's interesting. They're adopting podcast language is what it is.
Yes, but it's I don't think it's going to be successful for them because what they're not adopting is the authenticity of it, and it comes off as kind of like it goes, oh, now you're doing this? Like after all these years of pretending you were all formal and everything was about decorum and how Donald Trump was he wasn't presidential enough, and now you're like, oh, so you never really believed any of that shit. It's like them trying to turn on the woke stuff. It's like it just does. It's too long.
Right.
You were so married to this for too long.
You gave up your authenticity for too long.
Yeah.
And it's like a Chris Cuomo type deal.
It's like Chris Cuomo.
Like,
Elizabeth Warren drinking the beer, but like not doing it right. Putting like her whole mouth over a bottle of beer.
I want people to get better, right? So if you were a propagandist and you're like, you know what, this is bullshit. But there's examples of those people out there that are legitimate, you know? And then there's also people that realize like, oh, well, that job is over. I can't do that anymore. Now I have to be something different. Let me try to be authentic.
Yes, but people can read that, man. They can tell.
Well,
they
you're
can tell
also
the difference.
never going to fully be authentic. You're always going to hold something back. You're going to say things because you want people to think of you a certain way, rather than, okay, this is uncomfortable, but this is how I think.
Yeah. No, that's right. Oh, but so anyway, just on the signal thing though, again, like the real scandal here is not that they whatever, either intentionally or were just so incompetent that they added this journalist to it and it got leaked. Like the real scandal is like when you look through the chat and that it's like, what are we doing here? We're bombing another country in the Middle East. We're bombing the poorest country in the Middle East.
Yemen,
by the way,
which
Yemen
has been bombed forever.
Oh my God. On behalf of Israel, because they're standing up against this fucking brutal war in Gaza right now. And so we're going to bomb these guys again. And then you have like, I got to say, man, like I was disgusted by Tulsi Gabbard's response there. Someone who I've, said a lot of nice things about over the years and who I really supported as being the DNI. But like, literally only J.D. Vance is the only one who offers the mildest pushback and he's like, hey guys, this is kind of a mistake and it's kind of everything against what Donald Trump ran on. And by the way, like it's like such an insignificant amount of our trade that even goes through this area. It's really Europe's problem, not ours. But I'll go along with it if you guys want to, if you guys say, and then they literally say on the thing, they go, we've tracked the missile guy, as they call him, this is the target they're trying to take out. They go, we've tracked him to his girlfriend's apartment building. And so we'll level the apartment building. And then Tulsi Gabbard's just like, job well done, team. Everybody's cheering it on. There's not like nobody even has the thought to go like, is there a way we could do this without like murdering an entire apartment building's worth of people here? Is there a way? Man, this is a lot. Like, it's like, did none of you guys even kind of believe in God? Are none of you even scared that maybe God exists and that like, Jesus Christ, what are we doing here? There's none of that. There's not a feeling of that. There's not a sense of like, I know I've talked about this before on the show, but we got the whole history of the war in Yemen going all the way back to Obama's first term. I mean, what we've done to this country, the poorest country in the Middle East, I mean, it was a goddamn genocide that happened in Yemen. I mean, it was the drone bomb campaign from Obama was bad enough, but the Saudi invasion and the blockade and the war on the civilian population, hundreds of thousands of people died, hundreds of thousands of cases of like cholera and these other like real, very easily preventable and treatable diseases that babies were just dying of because they had a full blockade around the country. The U.S. Navy fucking enforcing the blockade, the U.S. fucking refueling the Saudi fighter jets and backing them the whole war there. And the idea that we think launching a couple Tomahawks is going to break the Houthis after they went through all that shit, there's no chance. Like, it's not, you're just killing people for no strategic benefit. There's the only thing that would actually, like, we could overthrow the Houthis if we wanted to invade the country. Like, the U.S. military could do that. But, like, short of that, the idea that
have to do, that's like a big public thing, which is bombing somehow or another, especially drone bombing, sort of like is in the ether.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost abstract.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, like, if we sent a tier 1 team to go take this dude out, that would be front page news. That would be like an act of war. That would be like a thing. We're declaring war on this country. We've invaded their land with actual boots on the ground. It's different for some weird reason. Like, you're allowed to use flying robots remote controlled by drone operators who, by the way, have some of the weirdest fucking PTSD. These people are all fucked up for a long time because they watch these folks, because they're watching these folks. They know the people around. They get to know. They watch them for days. They see them hug their kids, and then they get that fucking call. And
you don't get any of the, and I don't know, I mean, I'm just kind of speculating here. I'm no psychologist.
This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Sometimes speed is a huge asset. Like in the ring or on the field, being quicker than your opponent could be the difference between winning and losing. In the world of business, it could be the difference between finding or missing out on your next great hire. Luckily, you can speed up the hiring process with ZipRecruiter. Their new Zip Intro feature can help you meet several interested qualified candidates at once, kind of like speed dating. And right now, you can try Zip Intro for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Rogan. Zip Intro works fast to find the people you need. You can literally post your job today and start talking to candidates in back-to-back calls tomorrow. It's that fast. And best of all, this feature does a lot of the legwork for you. It finds you top talent for your role and schedules those calls. All you need to do is pick a time. Enjoy the benefits of speed hiring with Zip Intro only from ZipRecruiter, rated the #1 hiring site based on G2. Try Zip Intro for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Rogan. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/Rogan. Zip Intro. Post jobs today. Talk to qualified candidates tomorrow.
But there's something, I think, where, like, if you're in the fight, if you're in the action, you know, like a lot of different, you know, primal things are going to kick up. Like, you're, you know, as all the troops say, and I've talked to a whole lot of them, it's almost unanimous to a man that they always say the thing you're fighting for once you get there is your brother next to you. Like, it's not even, it's like, forget the mission or whatever. It's like, this is your guy right here. And you guys are going in to make sure your buddy doesn't get his legs blown off or whatever. But when you don't have any of that, there aren't bullets whizzing at you. There's not your friend next to you. There's not this, like, sense of, like, I had to do what I had to do. And when you're just watching it on a monitor from a safe distance, I think there's some way that fucks you up on a whole different level.
It's got to. It's got to haunt your dreams. It has to. There's no other way. I mean, you see a man holding his child and swinging her around in his arms, and then you know you're going to blow that man and that kid to smithereens.
Yeah.
And you have to, because the kids are near the dad, and we got to kill that guy.
When you got orders, you know, like that's
and a whole apartment building. Like, what are we talking? Like thousands of people?
But
what are we talking about to get to this guy?
Well, you know, there's a
mushroom
clip.
clown. Boom.
Yeah. Well, there's a clip that Tim Pool got, like, a real short interview with Donald Trump during the campaign. Like, I think he was the first one, but it wasn't like a long form podcast. Like, he was the first podcaster, but they did like 20 minutes or something like that. But he did get this one clip out of Donald Trump on that thing where Donald Trump is eviscerating Joe Biden for bombing the Houthis for the same exact reason, because they were firing on shipping lanes. And Donald Trump's like, what type of idiot is Joe Biden? I mean, these guys, their answer for everything is to drop bombs on it. Pick up a phone. Diplomacy can work here. Like, you don't have to do this. And the fact is that there were, during the ceasefire, which Trump's envoy negotiated, which has fallen apart now, but during the ceasefire, there were no Houthi attacks on the shipping lanes. Like, they stopped them. And then when the ceasefire fell apart, they picked them back up again. Now, feel however you feel about that. I'm just saying there is a diplomatic solution here, right? Like they are willing to, like, if there's a ceasefire, they will stop these attacks. But there's not a military solution short of invading the country and having yet another catastrophic war in the Middle East. And it's like, so which one of those do you want to pick? America first crowd? I mean, like, Donald Trump was explicitly elected for this reason, as a repudiation of the foreign policy of the last 30 years. Right. That we're like done with this. Right. We want to put America first. And as you could see, even J.D. Vance and then a little bit Pete Hegseth, their only issue, it's never the innocent people being killed, for a bunch of Christians. It's kind of weird that never comes up. But their issue is, this is us bailing out Europe, because Europe actually relies more on these shipping lanes than the United States does by orders of magnitude. But even that is part of the America First thing that Donald Trump totally ran against. Like, why is it that we have to foot the bill for everybody else's defense? That makes no sense. We're broke. Our country is in bad shape. We need those resources here.
What is the justification for these bombings? What is the public justification?
That the Houthis have attacked a few U.S. Cargo ships, and that there's, that their international trade, they don't have a right to disrupt international trade in this way, which is like, okay, it's true. I mean, the thing that I've seen the most is like that people will go, well, we can't just turn a blind eye to this aggression by the Houthis. But I also do think, and I don't even blame people for this, because it's nobody, in the corporate media or it ever talked about any of this stuff, or very rarely talked about it, never really told the story, that it's like, yeah, if you're just coming into the story now, I could see where you might think the Houthis are the aggressors. But if you're rewinding the tape from this, there is just no debate about it. Right. I mean, there's no question that we literally started, it was in 2009 when Obama started up with the drone bombing, the then secret drone bombing campaign, and Yemen was one of the major theaters. This was where, if you remember, because it was like the biggest scandal of the Obama administration, also not talked about much in the media, but was talked about on a lot of podcasts, was that Anwar al-Awlaki and his like 14 or 15-year-old son, his two American citizens, were both killed by drone bombs in Yemen. And this was caused a bit of an outrage among some people, because you were like, hey, you really can't murder American citizens who have never been charged of a crime. You can't just say, I just, forget that whole Bill of Rights thing. They're on my list. And by the way, the kid was not Al-Qaeda affiliated or anything, and they claimed that wasn't intentional, but it sure seemed like it was. But so Obama had a drone, he was fighting at the time, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula had like a presence in Yemen. So he's drone bombing these Al-Qaeda sites. I think the estimates were something like 95 to 96% of the people who died were not the targets. So just killing a whole bunch of innocent people. And then, as always happens in these situations, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula just grew stronger and stronger and stronger because this is, it's insurgent math. Like General McChrystal said, you kill a bunch of innocent people, and then, you kill one little girl, and she had 3 brothers and a father and 2 uncles, and they all join up Al-Qaeda now because, like, fuck you. They're going to get you back for that shit.
Everyone's radicalized.
Yes. So we're doing this drone bomb campaign over there. It's completely failing, and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is just getting stronger and stronger. At the same time, Obama kind of bribed off the dictator of Yemen at the time, this guy Saleh, and he was like, listen, if you let us do our fucking drone bombing campaigns in here, we'll give you a whole bunch of weapons and money. And so he took the deal. And then he used those weapons to go attack this group, the Houthis. And then he also started losing to them. Like, even with the U.S. weapons, the Houthis were fucking him up. And little by little, the Houthis like kind of took over the whole country. And then now the Houthis are also enemies with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Like, these are radical Sunnis, Al-Qaeda versus radical Shiites, the Houthis. And so they're fucking enemies, and they're fighting a civil war while all this is going on. And then Saudi Arabia decided to invade in early 2015. And in 2015, and you could look this up if you Google Obama to placate the Saudis. These are literally what the Obama officials told the New York Times. I believe it was the New York Times. They told them that literally this is why. So Obama stabbed the Houthis in the back, took Saudi Arabia's side, took Al-Qaeda's side, started fighting fighting in a civil war against the Houthis, which is, in effect, taking Al-Qaeda's side in that war. And so the Saudis invade the country. Now, Obama said essentially that because the Saudis are like an important trading partner, and they were pissed off at us at the time. They were very upset about the war in Iraq. The Saudis were the ones in the region who were against it the whole time because they knew. They were like, you're just going to give Baghdad to Iran, basically, and that's their big enemy is Iran. And then they were also really pissed off because Obama did the one decent thing he did in his administration was he worked out that deal with Iran, the same goddamn thing that Trump tore up and is now demanding they get back into some type of nuclear deal. But so in order to placate the Saudis, Obama goes, okay, we'll back your war here. And like I said, full blockade around the country, refueling their military jets.
Quiet support for Saudis entangles U.S. and Yemen. This is...
Yep.
Here it is. Obama, in an awkward twist, becomes Saudi Arabia's defender. Wow.
And it is hard to overstate how brutal the Saudis were in this war. I mean, you think of Gaza, something not too unsimilar to that. But you're talking like a full blockade around the country. This was the poorest country in the Middle East before any of this. Full blockade around the country. The Saudis were bombing. They were bombing their agriculture. They were bombing their wheat silos. They were bombing their irrigation ditches. They're just like a total war on the civilian population all the way from 2015 into 2021 when it essentially ended in an Afghanistan style, I guess we give up. It was just eventually the Saudis. I think the Houthis, one of the things that's really interesting that happened this whole time, like you were talking about the drone wars. So back in 2009, first of all, it was secret. The drone program wasn't, everyone knew it. There had been good reporting on it. But the way they got the good reporting was people found the drones in Yemen, and they'd take little, grainy cell phone pictures and be like, look, this is a U.S. drone. So there's clearly, but actually the Obama's press secretary, it's not, God damn it, not Jay Carney, his first press secretary. I'm blanking on his name, but he admitted this on NBC News. It was a really amazing, but he was talking about how the drone program, this is years later, 2012. He's at NBC News now. And he was talking about how when he used to get questions about the drone program, he wasn't allowed to even acknowledge that it was real. So he would just sit there. Yeah, Robert Gibbs. I apologize. I should have remembered that.
I was told not to even acknowledge the drone program.
There's video of this.
When I went through the process of becoming press secretary, one of the first things they told me was, you're not even to acknowledge the drone program. You're not even to discuss that it exists, said former White House press secretary Robert Gibbs on Up with Chris Hayes Sunday.
So now think about, okay, by the way, there is video of this. It wasn't, I don't know if it's in this article or not, but that was essentially the point. But the thing in the video, it's so funny, is they all are laughing about it. They're talking about what a funny thing it is. Imagine being in the position where you can't admit that a real thing's real and journalists are asking you questions. And he said, because it is kind of funny in a weird way, but that's you'd think a newsman that wouldn't be the number one thing. Oh, here, yeah, this is it.
I certainly think there are aspects of that program that are and will remain highly sensitive and very secret. But let me give you an example here, Chris. When I went through the process of becoming press secretary, one of the first things they told me was, you're not even to acknowledge the drone program. You're not even to discuss that it exists. Wow. And so I would get a question like that, and literally I couldn't tell you what major asked, because once I figured out it was about the drone program, I realized I'm not supposed to talk about it. But here's what's inherently crazy about that proposition. You're being asked a question based on reporting of a program that exists. Right. So you're the official government spokesperson acting as if the entire program, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Right, yeah. I think in many ways, and I think what the president has seen, and I have not talked to him about this, so I want to be careful. This is my opinion. But I think what the president has seen is our denial of the existence of the program, when it's obviously happening, undermines people's confidence overall in the decisions that their government makes.
That's the major problem with murdering people in the poorest country in the Middle East, you know?
Yeah.
It might undermine people's trust in you and therefore your ability to murder more people in the poorest country in the Middle East. So just like, by the way, whenever you see anyone over the last, like, say, 8 years on MSNBC or CNN talking about a threat to democracy and the free press and all this, shut the fuck up. You hired that guy. The guy who's sitting there telling you, like, when it comes to the issue, forget whether you're for the war or against the war. It's a secret war. You're not, forget democracy. The people aren't even allowed to have an opinion on this.
Even as the White House press secretary, you're not even allowed to acknowledge it.
And like, why not? Like, I mean, it's not as if they were like, well, if Al-Qaeda knows that we're coming for them, then something is compromised. It's just like, oh yeah, Obama ran as the peace candidate. He collected a Nobel Peace Prize before he had done anything. And he didn't particularly want to tell people that he had just started this new campaign of just murdering whoever he wanted to for whatever reason he wanted to. And, you know, one of the things that's interesting about the technology of it, and I remember people much smarter than me predicting this at the time, I guess I never really appreciated like exactly the timetable of all of it. But it went in 2009, which he's talking about 2009, a few years later there. It went from like, oh, the U.S. has this new technology where we can use drones in war, to all of a sudden now in 2025, you're sitting around and everybody like, this is just part of war now. You know, literally even the Houthis, I mean, they don't have the capabilities we have, but they have drone bombs. And that's part of how they were able to get the Saudis to finally back out, is like they could hit some of their oil fields with their drone bombs, and it was enough of a pain in the ass for the Saudis to be like, all right, like, call it quits. And so they ended that war in 21. But now these Houthis have been in charge of Yemen the whole time since. You know, in the same way that it was like, we fought this whole war to get the Taliban out of Afghanistan. We just lost. Like, they just still run the whole place. And so these guys are still there. They have gone through what was the worst humanitarian crisis in the world from 2015 to 2021. They survived all of that, and they're still there. And now they see the same goddamn thing happening in Gaza, and they're the one. Again, I'm not like, this is their stated thing. I'm not saying like they're all great people or something, but they're going like, no, fuck that. We're standing up for the people in Gaza. And so they were like, as long as all of you guys are supporting Israel, just slaughtering all these people, then we're going to start, you know, like trying to shut down these shipping lanes, which they don't really have the capacity to do, but they can hit some cargo ships and hit some military ships.
How does this ever settle? How does this ever relax? Like, when you look at what happened in Gaza and you think about the tensions that existed before October 7th, and then this happens, and then the Israeli attack happens, like, how does anything come to a peaceful resolution at this point?
Well, it looks really bad at the moment right now, you know? And like what I always like to say, which I, you know, is like 50% just me telling myself something to feel better about the situation. But then 50% like it is kind of, you know, like you could go around the world right now and like England is right next to Ireland. And everybody's just cool there right now. And that would have seemed like impossible, you know? Right. And like France and Germany and, you know what I mean? Like there are all these countries where like there was a time where it just seemed impossible. And, you know, that was Egypt and Israel. So Egypt and Israel went to war 4 times in the first 20-something years of the existence of the state of Israel. They just kept going to war and war and war against each other. And then in the late 70s, they made a deal. And it was like a land for peace swap.
But isn't it part of the problem that Palestine is not a state? Like,
oh, that's like the whole problem.
The whole thing is like you can never come to peace if you never even acknowledge they exist.
Yeah, they've had Israel took control of what are known as the occupied territories. They took control of Gaza and the West Bank in 1967, and it's one thing. Like, I'm not like saying it's ever justified, but like it's one thing to like occupy an area for a few months after a war, as you're going through the process of turning it over to the, you know, like to themselves, or it maybe even a few years. But like we're going into like 60 years of complete Israeli control over these people. And under Israeli control, they have zero rights. Zero rights whatsoever. I mean, like, they don't have the freedom of movement. They don't have freedom to trade with the outside world. They don't have voting rights. They don't have the right of due process. They get if literally to this day, like in the West Bank, where there's like all these big Israeli settlements because the Israelis are just constantly slowly stealing more of the Palestinians' land. If like an Israeli settler in the West Bank, in the same jurisdiction, gets in a dispute with a Palestinian there, the Israeli citizen, he's a citizen of Israel. He has rights. He goes to a trial. The Palestinian goes in front of a military trial. If he's lucky enough to get that, they have something like a 99% conviction rate. You're just totally fucked. Like, and then look, a lot of people will point to like there's been terrorism on the Arab side toward the Israelis going back many years. But like, I think you're essentially right. You can't expect a group of people who have to just be subjugated for eternity and nobody's going to try to violently fight back. And of course, when they non-violently try to fight back, that gets squashed too. That gets met with violence.
And then the wildest thing, Trump comes along and says, we're going to take it.
Yeah.
We're going to take it. We're going to turn it into the Mediterranean of the Middle East. I really just, and I'll say, listen, I know like the last time I was on election night, and I supported Donald Trump in this last election. I think Donald Trump was like a necessary force. Donald Trump is a once in a century type of figure. Yeah, I mean, there was just nobody was positioned to do the things that Donald Trump did. And there were like enormous positives that came out of him winning this election. I mean, Donald Trump landed a devastating blow on the Republican establishment in 2016 when he won the primary. And he landed a devastating blow against the Democratic establishment by winning the presidency this year. And he like destroyed the corporate media, like in a way that nobody else could have done. And all of those things are like incredible achievements, you know? But there is this like kind of tragedy with Donald Trump too, where it's like he's the one guy who was able to do all of this. And I will say there were hopes that it was like, hey, he maybe this time around, oh man, he's got Bobby Kennedy there. He's got Tulsi Gabbard there. He's got like right.
This is like a whole different thing.
I'm going to stop that war in one day.
Yes, right. He's here to end the wars. Also, like he had been burned by the system now in a whole. It's not just that they called him a Russian traitor or whatever. It's like they tried to throw him in jail. They tried to murder him. Okay, this
Somebody
is maybe.
did.
Oh no, yeah, no. I'm sorry.
Somebody
that was
did.
totally happened.
He had 5 phones.
Dude, a lot of times, as we all know,
Professionally scrubbed apartment.
Yes, that happens all the time, Joe. Many times, presidential candidates, the front runner to be president, once again, former presidents, a sniper gets a clean shot 130 yards away from them. That's
Especially
a very common thing.
A guy who was in a BlackRock commercial just a couple of years ago.
And a lot of those guys were in BlackRock commercials once, Joe. These are normal things that happen to normal people. It's part of everyday politics. But so a lot of this made people think like, oh, maybe. But I will say, already into Trump's presidency, it's just a lot it's like, shit. No, I guess I got to be happy with the things that he did. But the idea that he's really figured this out, or he's really on to something, or he's learned a lot, or the guy is out there, he's saying we should primary Thomas Massie and throwing his support behind Lindsey Graham. I mean, come on.
What is Thomas
Mr.
Massie doing that's pissing him off?
No, he didn't vote for the freaking spending bill. He voted against the CR because it increased spending and was increasing the debt, and it was refunding all of the programs that Doge had recommended be cut. So he was like, no, I'm not voting for this. And Trump was like, well, I'm going to need you to vote for it. And he was like, no. Oh. And that's it. That's his crime. The same thing, same reason Trump hated him in 2020, because he wouldn't vote for the $2 trillion COVID spending bill. Because he was like, wait, you're telling me because the country's locked down, that means we have to bail out every giant corporation around the country? Like, no, I'm not supporting this. And then Trump sent all his people to go, he's betraying America first or whatever. And there's once Trump gets in it, he just wants like, the next win. But, the real problem here is like, the idea that we are going to go and ethnically cleanse, like finish the job of ethnically cleansing the Palestinians out of Gaza on behalf of Israel. It's like, first of all, what do you think the reaction to that's going to be? What do you think that's going to do to our country here? It's like, I feel, it's like I see a lot of people who get very upset about what they call the rise of anti-Semitism. Which certainly, according to my Twitter feed, is is real,
It's real.
There's a lot of people.
Do you think it's is it a rise, or is it the ability to express it now been unlocked? Or is it both?
I don't know. Maybe both. You know, I have a tough time kind of figuring out exactly what it is. It's also there's a troll aspect to it. You know, there's when you make one thing the thing that you're not allowed to say, and the thing that's gonna get a rise out of everybody. This has been true, and it's been building for many years. Kind of the alt-right back in the day was kind of the first, version of this, but where you could be some guy just on your computer. You could be a 15-year-old on your phone or whatever, and you could get the New York Times senior editor to be like, oh, look at this outrage, and just the ability to provoke that reaction out of somebody that's fun.
Shitposting.
Yes, that's fun. And you're handing this person who has no power, like some real kind of power.
Right.
I also think that for young men today, particularly like young straight white men, I think it's kind of hard, like for me and you, to even understand the world they grew up in. It's very different than the world we grew up. Like they grew up in this woke era. And okay, now it's kind of like that's receded and wokeism has been defeated. But they grew up in a time where racialism was accepted by every powerful institution, just against them.
Right.
Like it was totally fine to demonize straight white men at your high school, at your college, in your movies, in your TV shows, your politicians, celebrities, everybody was just, and that does it unlocks a certain thing that we kind of all had a gentleman's agreement to not unlock. Like we're just not really going to do that. We don't want to be like racialists. And so I think that's a component to it too. But there's also no question that it's exploded since Israel's launched this war on Gaza.
Yeah, and it's exploded on the left, which you never heard anti-Jewish sentiment in public spaces before. You really never saw that on campuses. If Israel did something, you may see a protest, but it was generally it was organic. These don't seem organic. They seem very funded. And they're very disruptive. And, some universities experience vandalism and fires and crazy shit and people being threatened and doxxed. It's different. It's a different level of it than I think we've ever seen before. And it's created a giant divide on the left, right? Because on the left, you have a lot of people that are their whole life, they've been in support of Israel. Right. And now all of a sudden there's these Free Palestine people that are also on the left. So you have this divide on the left.
Yeah. And there was that divide goes back a lot. Like there were leftist divides over the Israel-Palestine question going back really to like 1967, where most of the kind of like the Black Power movement people, like the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, those guys, they all sided with the Palestinians because they all saw it as like an extension of like, yeah, that's the whole, we're against this kind of like racist colonizing, like force. And then, of course, there were a lot of influential Jewish people on the left who were like, no, not in this case, we're okay with it. But you guys sure are right about all that civil rights stuff. But like, let's not look at it. Let's not look over there. But so a lot of that has kind of reemerged. Now, I do also, I don't know. Like I talked to one kid who was like a grad student at Columbia, which was really like the center of so many of these protests, and he's Jewish. And I was like, so what's it like there? And he was like, they're annoying and they're Latin. Like some of their chants are like real kind of weird. I don't really know what they mean by it. And I was like, well, do you ever feel like threatened? And he's like, no, it's not. Like, it's fine. They'll just chant as you walk by. And then I do know also that they had at least one time, they had like a Seder service, because they got like Jewish people in those protest movements too. And so they, over last Passover, it was a year ago, they had like a Seder service with the Jews like in there too. So I don't know like what percentage of them are like just against the war and seeing pictures of dead babies and stuff like that. What percentage of them are actually, like harbor resentment toward Jewish people. Like it's kind of hard to measure. But I would just say that like it almost in a very similar way to like what I was talking about with the the drone war against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. It just made them stronger. You know, it's like, hey, if you want to see less Al-Qaeda, maybe stop having the American military kill innocent civilians in their land, because that seems to be fueling them. And at the same time, for the people who are so concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism, you're like, okay, well, it has exploded since Israel's been doing this to Gaza, right? So like maybe the U.S. shouldn't be funding and arming the whole goddamn conflict, because that does seem to like at least give those people a giant talking point to latch onto. Maybe we shouldn't have a system where like our political class is not allowed to criticize a foreign government, and a foreign government that's gotten us into like 7 wars, or at least played a large role in getting us into those wars explicitly. I'm not like alleging some secret conspiracy. Yeah. I'm saying like Benjamin Netanyahu is John McCain. Right. Like he's been telling us Iran has a nuke. He's been telling us they're 5 years away from a nuke since I was 7. Literally, he's been saying Iran is 5 years away from a nuke the entire time. And he came over here, he testified before Congress in 2002 that we, as a regional expert, that if we were to overthrow Saddam Hussein, democracy would sweep the region and there'd be all these positive reverberations. And then he goes, and you also got to overthrow the regime in Iran, and you also got to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. And like every single one of these things, not Iran yet, still pushing for that, but we went and overthrew Saddam Hussein. We went and overthrew Muammar Gaddafi. And I don't know what swept the region, but it wasn't democracy.
No, I remember in the early 2000s when I realized there's 2 fighting factions of Islam. I was like, what? Yeah. And that Saddam Hussein had actually kept that from boiling over. Yeah. Because he was in control.
Yeah. No, I remember learning it too, right around the same time.
You're like, wait a minute.
You're telling me there are shirts and skins over there?
They fight against each other? Like, what do they... Do you know the difference between Sunni and Shia?
I mean, I know that they're different sects of Islam, but like in terms of like the religion itself.
Is it like the Catholics versus the Protestants?
Yeah, I think it's something like that. Like it's always the people with the like most minor interpretations of their holy book differences who like go to war the most aggressively. Right. You know what I mean? Like it's like Catholics and the Protestants, or you know, like you agree on 95% of this religion, but like whatever.
If you didn't know about that conflict, you would never believe it's real. Like Christians going to war with other Christians, like different sects. Like brutal, horrible wars.
Especially when you could like read about Jesus and you'd be like, this doesn't seem to be what he's saying at all, man.
Yeah,
like,
who's at the helm of this fucking battleship?
It's unbelievable to me that and I'm not claiming to be any type of religious expert and I'm not a Christian, but it is unbelievable to me that anybody could be a Christian and could then like somehow do the mental gymnastics and rationalization to be like, and that's why you got to support every war. That's why we got to fight every single one of these wars. Because, you know, just like that guy Jesus told us, slaughter women and babies. You're like, seems like the opposite of his message from my humble understanding of it.
So the argument of that, if you want to take the argument, would be like, you have to do that to protect everyone here.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the argument, right?
Like we have to go to war with Iran, a country that doesn't have nuclear weapons or an air force capable of delivering them here.
And it's so convenient that they're evil. So convenient that they torture students and they execute Olympic gold medalists in wrestling because they protested against the government. It's so convenient.
Well, it's also like, you know, there's evil shit going on all over the world. And it's terrible that there is. But isn't it interesting how like the next war, you know, like I did a debate at Princeton University a few months back against Josh Hammer, who's is an editor at Newsweek. And we did like an Oxford-style debate on whether the U.S. should support Israel. And you know, one of the things he said to me, so I was talking about like all this stuff, like the clean break strategy and the 7 countries in 5 years. And he was like, oh, the war in Libya, that was a totally separate thing. Like that was like a liberal interventionist war. And I was like, well, it sure is a coincidence that it was one of the 7 countries. You know what I mean? Like, what a wild coincidence.
Kind of crazy.
That the government we decided to overthrow was the exact government that 4-star General Wesley Clark told me we were planning on overthrowing way before any of these claims about how Gaddafi... They made all these
Libya
bullshit
one
claims.
Is wild.
Yeah.
The Libya one's wild when you see how good of a leader he was. Obviously an evil dictator. No questions.
An eccentric fellow.
Yeah. Definitely a piece of shit. However, for the people that lived there, they got no interest loans. They had incredible infrastructure. Their economy's doing well. They were at peace.
I think it was one of the richest countries in Africa, which is, grading on a curve, but
then,
still.
a few years later, after we invade, or we helped people, we assisted, it becomes a failed state, and they have slave auctions on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I've heard it's recovered somewhat. People reach out from Libya and tell me that Tripoli is actually not bad
is
now.
doing better
Yeah.
than it was. But also, and the other part of this is that this was a huge contributing factor to the migrant crisis in Europe. Like all these things
Right.
do have like these domino effects
Right.
where it does. So then Gaddafi also was kind of like not allowing that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had these huge numbers of refugees pouring into Europe.
But
then
not
you see
just
the rise
pouring
of
in, but it seems like they're wanting them to pour in.
yeah.
This is where it gets really strange. I had a conversation with someone about this that didn't understand it, and we were going over civil unrest and what the use of civil unrest. One of the things that civil unrest does do really well is it makes people want to have measures to stop civil unrest that ultimately erode liberties.
Yep.
It's a really good strategy. So if you want to take away people's guns, take away right to protest, one of the best things to do is to release as many criminals as you can and flood your city with violence and crime. The more violence and crime you have, the more people will be freaked out. The more people will be freaked out, the more likely they are to give in to new measures of control.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you can do that worldwide.
Well, you
do
can
that
watch it.
But also, let's talk about Europe, okay, in particular. Let's talk about Germany. Let's just talk about the UK. What have they been doing besides letting in immense numbers of migrants? One thing they've been doing is arresting people for Facebook posts. They're arresting people for stepping out of line. So they're moving closer and closer to totalitarianism. And if you look at the numbers of people, that have been arrested for just Facebook. One of them was someone just got arrested, pulled out of his house at 2 o'clock in the morning for a Facebook post saying that he didn't like the Palestinian flag. This is wild stuff. It's wild stuff. And thousands of arrests, not just – have you ever seen Konstantin Kisin talking to someone about this? And he was explaining – he was explaining like Russia imprisoned 400 people for posts on social media. That's crazy, right? How many do you think the UK did? And he's like, I have no idea. It's like 4,000. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
Thousands of people are getting arrested in the UK, and you're only seeing some of them. You're seeing the people that are filming it at the time who have the wherewithal to grab a cell phone. There's a lot of people that have just been by themselves that just got scooped up.
What was it? I think it was 60 Minutes did a piece where they had like 3 lawyers. They were sitting there and were kind of like asking them like, so would this post be okay? Would this be okay? Could I say something? And they're like, well, posting it is actually much worse than just saying it. And it is really creepy.
It's really creepy.
But you're so right. You're so spot on about this kind of like this like 1-2 punch of like destabilization and then government coming in with the solution.
Yeah.
It's Harry Brown, who was he's deceased now, but he's a brilliant guy. He was he ran for president on the Libertarian Party in '96 and 2000. But he used to say the government breaks your leg and then offers you a crutch. And then they convince you to be thankful for the crutch. And you're like, man, if this government wasn't here, I wouldn't have a crutch. I'd be walking around on broken legs. But you see it where look, even if you just watch, I remember during 2020, when the George Floyd thing first happened, and forget whatever the autopsy, there was the one autopsy that said it was fentanyl that killed him. Leaving all of that aside, just when the video of that Derek Chauvin kneeling on this guy's neck, who's on the ground and crying in pain, and he's kind of smiling, and then the guy dies. Everybody I know, it was so unified. I knew hardcore right-wingers, my Fox News watching father-in-law. I remember I was at his house the day it happened, and he goes, every one of those cops should be put in handcuffs on national television. And he goes, they should all be charged with murder. There was, that was you cannot do this. And then after the riots started in the summer, all those same people were like, send in the military. You know what? Like you just see how like someone could so quickly go from like, you know, we really need some police reform here. Like there is too much state power of policing. To then after you see some riots, what are you asking for? Well, who's going to stop that?
Martial law?
Yeah, we need the government to come in and crack down. More police power than ever before. So you could see like, and that's just like a little scale, but you could see how much that demand and sometimes very understandably so. Like in that example, very understandably so. Because you're like, well, I don't know. Like, I'm totally against like the over-militarization of the police. But when you have these huge riots across every major city in the country, you're like, well, I guess this is the one time we have a reason to have that. And then, by the way, of course, they don't do anything to stop it.
Yeah.
They just let it go.
The George Floyd one was fascinating because it wasn't a setup. It was just an organic moment where someone was filming some guy who had a guy lean. Now, was he on his neck or was he on his shoulder? Because I keep hearing people online saying he was on his shoulder.
Maybe that might be right.
The thing is, on the neck, you're really going to go out. You're going to go to sleep. You know, if the guy's really pressuring your neck like that, you're going to, like, anybody who thinks that's not a big deal, get someone who knows how to put weight on the knee, leaning on your neck. Okay, he's right on the neck, no question at all. Okay, that will put you to sleep for the most part, and that will definitely constrict your breathing, depending upon how much weight he actually has on that neck and how strong George Floyd is. Now imagine this guy's already fucked up. He already has an enlarged heart. He's on fentanyl. He's already fucked up. But would he have died without this happening?
Well, from what I understand, there were two autopsies.
People want to say it was an overdose. Well, it's certainly he had poor health because of drug abuse, and it certainly must have contributed to it. But are you saying that that wouldn't have a giant effect on someone in poor health? Like if you did that to an old man with emphysema, if you had some guy who's been smoking cigarettes for 50 years and you got on his neck, he could fucking die right there. Whereas if you didn't get on his neck, he'd probably live a long time.
Right, and you can't say it was the smoking that killed him if it was that.
Right. Remember Eric Gardner? It was another one.
Yeah,
and Eric Gardner, people were saying, he died because he's fat and he had a heart attack. I was like, no, dude, that guy's choking him. Yeah. And if you don't think that guy's choking him, let me grab your neck like that. You don't think that's a choke?
Yeah.
Because it's one arm? I'll put you to sleep with one arm.
Yeah.
You could put someone to sleep.
I've watched UFC fighters get put to sleep. Professional fighters get put to sleep with one arm.
Professional world champion Sean Brady choked out Leon Edwards for the most part with a one-arm guillotine.
And Luke Rockhold got Michael Bisping the same way.
One-arm guillotine. Yeah.
Bisping
Tito Ortiz got somebody with that. The one-arm guillotine is legit. That's legit.
And anybody who's like... If anybody who like knows what they're doing, it was grappling anyone who doesn't know what they're doing, they could all one arm choke you out.
Yeah, they were saying, oh, he just restrained him. Like, no. When you restrain someone, you get their arms behind their back, you pin their weight down. You could just restrain the guy if you're a good jiu-jitsu practitioner with your body weight. If you have you're on top. He's face down. You put your hooks in. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You flatten him out. You underhook him. You pull his arms out. Someone cuffs him. You don't choke him. You don't have to choke him. The guy wasn't resisting at all. So that was another one, right? But these are real moments. These are organic moments. They're not setups, but boy, are they good at capitalizing on those fucking things. And then when you see public officials going with this swarm of narrative, the swarm of narrative was defund the police. Like, are you guys out of your fucking mind? In the middle of these riots, you're going to go against the police instead of going against the rioters? You got one bad cop. That bad cop should be prosecuted or something should happen. He should be, if the guy died of an overdose, at the very least, what he's doing seems to be brutal.
Yeah.
And unnecessary.
Yeah,
unnecessary
exactly.
And brutal. The guy's not resisting. You put your weight on his back. It's hard enough. It's so hard to get up if someone has their fucking knee on your back. It's so hard to get, especially if you're out of shape and you have an enlarged heart and you're on fentanyl.
Now, there's also 7 cops around him. And he wasn't, I've watched the whole body cam footage. He was clearly fucked up. And he was clearly having like a massive panic attack. Yeah. But he wasn't like being like violent with the cops. He wasn't a threat for that many cops.
The cops get so desensitized, and you have so many experiences with one individual. This guy had a long criminal record. The people that worked that area probably all knew him. Didn't Derek Chauvin and him work together somewhere?
Yeah, I remember hearing that, but
Security
I don't know what yeah, they were
somewhere.
like they were doing some
So they
security
knew
gigs
each other?
together. I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So it's probably some get back involved in that knee on the neck.
it's right, quite possibly. It's also one of those things where like it is. Look, most of the time someone won't die
Right.
if you do that.
They
you know what I
probably
mean?
do that all the
like,
time.
yeah, exactly. But there is.
And most of the time, someone's not filming it.
Yes,
That's
also,
the big
also
one.
true.
That's
and
the
if
big
the body cam footage comes out, it's usually much later, so it's not
Yeah.
kind of like as a media of a thing. Also, usually every single media outlet in the entire United States of America, in the middle of a lockdown, doesn't play the video on repeat all day, every single day,
Right.
because there was no reason. The thing about George Floyd that was crazy is that there was no reason for it to be a national story, and there was no reason for it to be a racial story. Like there
Wait a
wasn't.
minute, really? Why don't you think there would be no reason for it to be a national story when a cop kills
Oh well, I
a
just
guy
mean
for a false $20 bill?
No. When I say that, okay, I'm not saying there's no like story there. I'm saying there wasn't. We're a country of 330 million people. There are a number of these incidents that happen every year. Not like a crazy high number, but like there's a few hundred of these every year. This one kind of seemed to get picked as like we're all going to run with this right now.
Because we got the full video. We got
Yeah,
a 4
I guess-
minute. It's
okay,
like
that's fair.
go back
That's
to
a fair
Rodney
point.
King. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I guess, okay, that is a fair point. The Rodney King one was a bit different. I mean, number one, the video element then was way crazier because it was
Nobody had ever seen a video.
no one.
before.
There's
Right.
a guy with a giant thing who happens to be on his balcony at the right time,
Right.
and also they beat the ever loving shit out of him.
With
Like it was,
clubs.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they were just after he was down and taken, they just kept going and
Right.
kept going. But the other thing that I always thought was like, you kind of the George Floyd thing. It's not like there was like any element in there where like they were calling him the N-word or there was some type of like racial like thing. Like it didn't ever seem to me that there was any reason to believe that like had he been a giant white dude tweaking out on drugs doing the exact same thing, it wouldn't have gone the exact same way.
Right,
So-
but he wasn't.
Yeah,
the thing
no,
is,
that's true.
it is post Rodney King. It is a white guy on the neck of a black guy.
But there was also a Asian cop and a black cop, and
yeah, but they
you know,
weren't doing the kneeling, and they also
that's
got
true.
prosecuted.
That's a fair point. That is a fair point.
Didn't they get prosecuted?
He got convicted of murder. I do not
think
remember.
the Asian
what-
cop got
Is that right?
prosecuted as well.
Am I-
See what other cops got prosecuted. I think it's one of those things where you're just supposed to step in and say you got to get
agree.
off his back.
I think that's totally reasonable. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that's to be like, hey, listen, he is totally.
The thing is, like, I want to know, was he on his neck the whole time? Because I had heard that he was on his shoulder, but that is on his neck. So
Well,
it's like,
that- yeah, at least that
I'd have to
part.
go watch that horrible video over again, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's dark.
Today I was watching some horrible videos today from Gaza. This guy carrying around a headless baby, showing what happened to his child. It's just so fucked. Another guy was holding a child's arm in his hand.
Dude, it is so.
It's
I mean,
so
like
fucked.
the level of evil that this shit is. I mean, you see, I know you've seen it, but you see the drone videos, like the aerial footage
Yeah.
of Gaza. Gaza's gone.
It's gone.
They fucking destroyed the whole goddamn place. I saw one.
It's hard to believe.
I saw one estimate said that it was 90% of the population has been what's the word I'm looking for? That they've been
Displaced?
Displaced, yeah. That they've 90% of them are
Who's
out
the
of nowhere.
10%
Yeah, I know.
gangster
I know
that's still there?
I'm good,
Find that guy and train him. That's
Yeah,
your
really.
Rambo.
but it is.
What is
The
this,
cops-
Jamie?
3 of the cops were found guilty of violating his rights, and one other one got pled guilty to aiding and abetting second-degree murder or manslaughter.
Yeah, that was the Asian guy.
He got 3.5 years.
Jesus.
All right.
Aiding and abetting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you kind of have. You're a cop. You kind of have a responsibility to stop that.
And then there's also the level of fentanyl. We've discussed this, right? Because people keep saying that he died of a fentanyl overdose. But I don't believe the level of fentanyl in his body was enough to give him an overdose. For the how LD50 rates work. You know how that works.
No, I
Lethal dose for 50% of the population. That's how they determine whether
Right,
or not.
okay.
So the problem is, you get 100 people, give them all the same amount of stuff. 50 of them are going to die. 50 of them are going to live. So that's how you find what the LD50 of a drug is. So when you have something like fentanyl, this is a guy's like an inveterate fentanyl user. He probably has a very high tolerance to opiates. you know,
right.
and I
Yeah.
don't.
And he's huge. He's a big dude.
He's a big
too.
dude.
Yeah.
But he was obviously dying from drug abuse. He had an enlarged heart. He was fucked up, you know, and the levels though when they were like at the
This is
threshold.
From, not the official autopsy, but this is the doctor that did one of them, I think, and he said here. I don't know if you can read that, but
Yeah, nanogram fentanyl at 11 nanograms per deciliter. This is higher than chronic pain patient. If he were found dead at home alone and no other apparent causes, this could be accepted. Call on overdose. Deaths have been certified. I don't know what that says.
see what that is.
Level of 3. So level of 3. He was at 11. So deaths have been certified at a level of 3 nanograms per deciliter. He was at 11 nanograms per deciliter. I am not saying this killed him. Fentanyl metabolite 4 AMPP. Think this is non-commercial. Meth 19. Oh, he had meth too. 19 nanograms per deciliter. This is
Relatively low.
relatively low.
That's bad for your heart.
But meth's bad for your heart. From video I've seen, it appears like his knee is on the side of the neck, not where the structures are. That doesn't mean anything. That's silly. That's a person who's never been choked. You shut your mouth. Shut your mouth, doctor. Let me lean on your neck, bitch. Breathe deep.
Yeah, right.
What are you talking
right,
about? That's
right.
so crazy. That's not going to crush his windpipe?
Yeah.
What are you talking
yeah,
about?
No, that just seems ridiculous.
That's so stupid. He crushes everything. If I got on your neck here, you're not doing nothing. There's none of this is going to work. Look, when you have a big neck, you can die from your tongue. You know that? People die of sleep apnea, like football players.
Like
big
they
old,
swallow
thick
their
dude.
tongue?
No, their tongue closes
Oh,
over the
jeez.
back of their mouth because they have so much neck tissue
Right.
that their air
Jeez.
hold gets smaller. Right now, I want you to imagine someone compressing that neck tissue with 210 pounds of body weight, all positioned on their knee.
Yeah.
Yeah, bro,
That's-
you can
yeah.
put someone to sleep that way.
Yeah.
Like
No.
they'll die if you hold on to it. They'll die.
It's indefensible. And
It's crazy.
and and I think the country had kind of like the appropriate reaction to
But then
it.
they're trying to say that cops can't use chokeholds anymore. Well, that's crazy too, because you should be able
Well,
to. If you're a cop, you got to be able to choke people. Like if you get some wild, methed up fucking dude and he's attacking cops and he's got his shirt off and fucking swastikas on his chest and you want to strangle that guy,
Sure.
put him away, put him asleep, then you can cuff him. You can do that. Go
Yeah.
to sleep.
In fact, it might
Yeah.
be
It's
it,
the
it
safest
might be
thing
the
for
much
him.
safer way than like tasing someone and then where they stiffen up and just fall over.
If he just choked George Floyd out and then cuffed him,
Yeah.
that would be way better for everybody.
Yep.
Like a real simple 5-second rear naked choke. He goes to sleep temporarily. You cuff him. He wakes up. None of the trauma to his neck. None of that shit. None of the 4 minutes, whatever it was, seconds.
No nationwide riots.
No nationwide riots. It's
Maybe
real
there would have been
simple.
for a different reason.
It's
but,
just a
you know.
jujitsu move, and then you cuff them, and you know. But man, being a cop is the most fucking thankless, psychotic job in this country. And every day they pull up to cars and they worry that they're going to get shot. Everybody's seen videos of cops. They pull up to fucking tinted windows and they get blasted.
Yeah, I just saw one today.
There's so many of them.
And it was great. The one I saw today too was one where like there was almost no tell. Like it was they had this stop and they were just like, hey, you know, buddy, is this your car? And he's like, yeah, it's my car. And he seemed totally cool. And they're just like, okay, license and registration. He goes, I actually don't have my license on me. And he goes, you're driving without a license? All right, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step out. And then just comes out, boom, 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 shooting at him and shoots one of the cops. The other one gets behind the car, starts shooting back. Yeah. It's like, yeah, no, listen, I get that's got to be a crazy thing to, you know, it's like I remember hearing a baseball player say once that he was like, he goes, the toughest thing about being like in the outfield is that like if you think about the game, like every single pitch, you got to immediately like be like, oh, is it coming to me?
Right.
And then it's just like not is, you know, and like you got to like be ready for that one time where like it is coming to you. And I'd imagine there's something like that with the cops.
Times
it's like
a million.
Every routine traffic stop, you got to be a little bit concerned about that. On the other hand, that is the job. And there are expectations when you're, you know, if your salary is paid by the people's taxes, and like the standard has to be probably the same thing I think the standard for fighting wars should be. The standard should just always be, do you absolutely have to do this? You know, like if you don't have to,
like the Eric Gardner situation.
Yes, like
you
do you
don't
have to do
that.
this?
He's selling.
Okay,
loose
he's selling
cigarettes.
loosies. Okay, there's got to be some. I understand.
Tell him
like,
not to do that.
Right.
It's
and
nothing.
I understand. Like maybe there's like human beings could get very creative, man. We could find. I understand you're saying. Okay, there's the guy inside the store has to sell cigarettes with the tax on them. He gets to sell these loosey cigarettes. It's hurting this guy's business, and maybe he's asked him to leave and he hasn't. We're talking about selling loose cigarettes outside of a store. You just don't need to bring this level of violence, for this situation. And it's one of the things like I know I saw you were talking about the other day with the Trump deportation stuff, where there's like this it's an interesting moment that we're in right now, because if you remember in Trump's first term, this was one of the biggest kind of like controversies that he lost a lot of public support over, was the kids in cages thing. And okay, now
turns out they'd always put kids in cages.
Yes, they were built under the Obama administration. It was kind of bullshit. They took some pictures of a kid crying that wasn't even really about the Trump deportations. Like, the media lies. That's what they do. But there is something about, like in the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King and those guys, they picked Birmingham, Alabama. Like they knew what they were doing, and they knew that they were going to get this reaction, and that then it could be on TV, and they almost forced the American people to watch these young black men in suits and ties have fire hoses and dogs sicked on them, and even for the 1960s American person who maybe harbored like some significant degree of prejudice, even for them, just seeing that was like, oh, Jesus, like, I can't support that. Right. You know what I mean? And there is something with, the U.S. has had just an insane immigration policy, really since 1965. But I mean, the Biden immigration, it was just like the most insane policy. Joe Biden seems to me like at least part of his legacy is he moved the country further right on immigration than you could have imagined. Is now super majorities of the American people support mass deportations. But just like there's a difference between being a little bit racist against black people and being able to watch, cops unleash German shepherds on black dudes in suits and ties, it's one thing to kind of believe, I think the people who are here illegally got to go back. It's another thing to like watch it unfold and see what type of, and I'll just say this, like on the theme of what I was saying like earlier about the signal stuff, there were so many efforts to like sabotage Donald Trump's first presidency. In this moment, if you really want to see mass deportations, which by the way, we're not seeing, but if you really want to see that, as most Americans do, you've finally won the argument. You finally won the day. You've now got supermajorities of the American people on your side, and you've elected a president that this is his signature issue. The last thing you would want to do is go round up 234 of them with no due process and send them to the most notorious, brutal prison in El Salvador.
And get some of them
like,
wrong.
Like, what the fuck are you thinking?
And get some of them wrong.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you're saying there haven't been mass deportations. What do you mean by that?
I mean in large numbers. Like there have been deportations. They've already kind of slowed down, but we have tens of millions of illegal immigrants in the country.
Right, but that's not what they're looking for. What they're looking for is the criminals. And here's allegedly, right? This is what we're hoping. But here's the problem that bothers me: quotas. I had a friend who was a cop who would tell me about quotas for speeding tickets back when they weren't supposed to tell people about that. Mm-hmm. They have quotas. Right. And I said, so it's basically like being a glorified revenue collector. And he's like, pretty much. If I'm not writing tickets, it's going to come down on me. Like, imagine a day where everybody made a decision. Like, for the next 60 days, collectively, as a country, no one's going to violate any traffic laws. Everyone's going to stop to a complete halt at every stop sign. No one's going to go a mile an hour above the speed limit. What happens? What do these cops do? If you have quotas, so you're assuming that people will always break the law forever. And if they don't, do you adjust? Do you fire the cops? Do you cut your budget? What do you do?
Do you remember when this happened in New York City? It was over a decade ago. There was they had this like unofficial official police like slowdown where they were upset about this. I can't remember the exact story, but it was the head of the police union said that he was like, we will only be enforcing like violent crimes.
It was
and we're
when
not
the
doing any
stop
of this
and
other
frisk.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
over the stop and frisk controversy, and they were
Yeah.
kind of like, "Oh, you guys want to all call us racist?" Which already I thought was so hilarious. I used to have a joke in my act about this many years ago, but where it was just like that was the threat from cops was like, "We're only going to arrest violent criminals," and you're like, "That's probably what you should be doing to begin with." Like,
Yeah.
what are we? And so then like all these and everything was fine. By the way, there wasn't a rise in violent crime. It was just they just stopped doing it, but revenue started collapsing, and then they like whipped the cops into getting back to it. Like they were like threatening their pensions and shit, and they were like, "Yo, you cannot do this.
Isn't that crazy?
You got to keep policing for profit."
Isn't that crazy? Policing for profit. It's crazy. It's crazy that they write tickets. Like tickets are kind of nuts. You know, it's like you have to give us money because you went too fast.
Well, I've always
Because that's the incentive that everyone agrees is going to work. God, I got another ticket.
yeah.
Fuck.
I always thought like
You gonna stop speeding? No, I'm gonna get a radar detector.
Yeah, well, right. People find a way. I always thought there was something really unfair that I've heard some progressives talk about this, but it never seemed to like get that much traction. But there is something about like giving a ticket that's like you know what it just seems so regressive in terms of like it's so much more punitive toward poor people and working class people than it is toward the well, and it's the same number for all of that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like there's something
Don't give
about
them
that
any
that's
ideas,
fucked
dude.
up.
They'll
No,
start
I'm not
giving
sure.
rich
I know.
people big
I know.
tickets.
This is the way this is the problem is that progressives that will take that and go, oh, okay, so that means up it on the rich people. It's like, no, that's not what I'm
Tax
saying.
the rich.
But like, you know, you
Man.
hand out a $75 ticket to somebody who's making like $400 a week, and you're like, Jesus Christ, dude, like that is devastating to that person.
Yeah.
Whereas like you hand out a $75 ticket to like a rich person, it's kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
you know, that's a reasonable
Whoopsies.
punishment for that. I mean, you know, anyway,
Yeah.
listen, I'm not advocating like I'm not a leftist.
get
I don't
you.
care about equity.
It is
but
no, that's not a good idea. But it is a strange thing that there are revenue collectors who are also peace officers. Like it seems like that should be a completely different thing.
Yeah.
It seems like cops shouldn't be pulling people over because your fucking taillight's out. That seems silly. That seems like a totally different proposition.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely
The problem
agree.
is they pull people over for doing stupid shit, and a large percent of them are carrying drugs. A lot of them have fucking bricks in the back of their car. That's the craziest thing about guys who are trafficking drugs. They're trafficking like fucking 30 pounds of fentanyl, and they get pulled over for speeding.
For some speeding thing. Yeah, or something like that. Oh, dude.
They're coked up, and they're fucking driving fast, and they got a trunk full of fucking illegal guns and cocaine and meth. And why aren't you going so slow and cautious? Why aren't you using your blinker? You should be listening to country music on your radio.
Nah, dude, you got meth to get
should,
somewhere.
You should have a fucking Cat Diesel hat on. You should be nice and calm and slow. You're a regular guy just going about your day.
Well, by definition, these people aren't making the wisest decisions,
No.
probably.
Who do you get to
I'm
drive
sure.
your fucking car filled with meth? You got to get a crazy dude.
It's not as easy as you'd think. You
It's
really
not.
gotta. You can't just put a Craigslist ad up or whatever.
Right.
Like I'm sure you got to go through some sketchy channels
And
to
now
get
with
there.
this Tom Homan guy sending everybody across the border, you can't even get the Mexicans to do it anymore.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, that guy is. It is funny where like I get where he's kind of like the guy you'd want if you're like we need a hard ass in here to do this. But when you do start getting these concerns about due process, I mean his response. It was in some interview where they were asking him about due process for the people he's deporting, and he's like, what's the girl?
Where was a good due process for Lake and Riley?
For Lake and Riley. Where was the
Yeah.
due process for her? And you're like, yeah, but dude, that's not what due process means.
you gotta
like,
be
obviously,
sure.
murder victims don't get due process. That's why it's illegal to murder somebody. And even, by the way, in that case, her killer got due process and then got convicted of murder. You know what I mean? Like, that's the
Right.
whole point. And there's just, again, like I was saying, it seems there's a few moves that the Trump administration has made so far. And I don't know who is in his ear and who has convinced him to pursue this policy. But like, again, if you wanted to pursue like mass deportations, which I understand, I think there's a strong case. I mean, look, he's done a great job of stopping the flow which was job number one. And that was his best line at his State of the Union, where it was like the Democrats kept saying we needed legislation to close the border. Turns out we just needed a new president, which is shockingly true. Like, it is unbelievable how it went from record high border crossings under Biden to record low border crossings over Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I do think that so much of that is just that it's a real difficult journey. And if people feel like, oh, Trump's in there, obviously we're not going to be allowed in, then they just won't go through it. I also do think that Donald Trump is fundamentally correct with his idea that, like, you don't have a nation if you don't have borders. Like, you can't listen. The idea, at least, I'm not saying this is really how it works, but the idea is that we're a free country because we have self-government. And in other words, the American people get to decide how many people we bring in here and how many we don't. And that it's at this point, nobody actually knows the number for sure, but it is north of 30 million illegal immigrants in the country. But my God, if you wanted to start deporting people who are legal residents, who are not violent criminals because they wrote a pro-Palestinian op-ed, you're diving into the most contentious issue and then picking one side of that. And then, like, this just seems like it's almost as if you're trying to poison the possibility to ever really have mass deportations. It just seems so counterproductive by his own stated goals. And
well, there's so many layers of it that are hard to unpack for the average person. What's really hard to unpack, especially for like tried and true blue no matter who Democrats, is this idea that they were bringing people into this country, moving them into swing states, getting them on Social Security, giving them money and incentives and all sorts of government programs that would get them eventually to be voters.
yeah.
And these voters would vote for that party, and you'd have a unit party. So in that sense, that's the big one that a lot of people that are left-wing people have a really hard time swallowing. They don't believe that's true. And they'll take it, well, what about when Texas sent those people up to New York? You know, the governor of Texas sent people to New York. Right. But do you know that New York's not a swing state? Yeah, he did that. But why did he do that? He did that as a big fuck you to New York for the government to turning a blind eye to the problem at the border and saying, okay, you think this isn't a problem? I'm going to send this problem to you.
It was to
you have a
expose their
sanctuary
hypocrisy.
state?
Yeah.
You have a sanctuary city? Oh, that's cute. I'll send you thousands and thousands of people that you're going to have to take care of now. And they did. And then that's even weirder because then they took over fucking luxury hotels and they had to deal with it. I think Pakistan owns one of those hotels.
Oh, is that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Who owns the big one that was in that fucking Jennifer Lopez movie where she was a hot maid? Remember that movie? Made in Manhattan.
I never saw it, but I vaguely remember.
I watched it recently with my family. It's the most ridiculous thing. She's on 10. And she's just like this poor little sad maid. Pakistan International Airlines has owned the structure. They own the Roosevelt. So the Roosevelt's an iconic hotel in New York City, and they get paid by the federal government, or they did get paid by the federal government to house immigrants there. And they give them food and they give them money. They give them, and like, what are you doing? Like, if you're allowing these people to vote in regional elections, okay, you've essentially now you've bought regional elections, and if you want them to eventually become United States citizens and give them a pathway to citizenship, which all good people would want, Dave Smith. Okay, now you have voters, and if you do that en masse, which they did, they brought people in this. They invited people, helped people. The Red Cross was like giving them maps, like this is how you do it. They had stops along the way where you give them water and you walk right through, and everybody just gets to be on a bus and you get shipped off to swing states. That literally happened. And people on the left do not want to address it. They want to deny it. It was an attempt to take over.
Yeah, and look, I'll say I know this because I'm like, this is, I guess, that one of the benefits of like getting older and paying attention to this shit is like I can remember shit from 15, 20 years ago. Like I was paying attention then. And I remember all of them admitting this was their plan.
Yeah.
Like literally all of the Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow and all, they used to call it the Browning of America. And they used to openly brag about how the Democrat will have super permanent majorities forever. Because look, like, hey, you old dying white Republicans, like, sorry, that's it for you because the Latinos vote overwhelmingly for Democrat and we're going to be a majority minority country and then a majority Hispanic country and then the Democrats rule the day forever. So this is just, Mitt Romney or whoever's running for president right now, this is the dying throes of the end of a... But then when people started objecting to that policy, And they called it the Browning of America, and then when people objected to it, they would call it the Great Replacement or whatever. And then they'd go, "You're not allowed to say that. That means you're a Nazi." And you're like, "But I just heard you saying it. Like 5 years ago, I heard you saying this."
You can't use the term replacement
yeah,
theory.
So there was this weird, and then there was also the one of the other big tells of this was the way they attempted, which really failed, but the way they attempted to make voter ID like a toxic racist policy, which was so, I mean, the logic of it just collapses on itself, because if it's, first of all, it seems like some bigotry of low expectations to imply that black people are like, just can't figure out how to get ID.
Do you remember Kathy Hochul saying that they don't know what computers are?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Do you remember that video?
That is the craziest.
I think you sent
First
me
of all,
it.
every fucking human being has a computer in their pocket.
Dude, what was the black dude who made that video? It was the funniest goddamn. I think you sent it to me, but he was like, there was like a computer, and he comes in just dancing around it, and he's like trying to bite it and stuff too. It was so goddamn funny. Where you're like, that's literally what you're saying. Like, I don't know.
And it's like spliced, like on the left side of it is her explaining that black people
he's
don't
like,
know.
Looking at
These
it
black
like
inner city kids, they don't know what a computer is.
Well, but then I mean, like, just like using the most basic logic, you'd be like, okay, wait a minute, but like, so if requiring ID is racist, then like we got some other really big problems in this country that we should be looking at. Like,
well, not only that, but it's in the direct memory, the recent memory of everybody needing ID because you had to prove that you got the COVID vaccine.
Right. Yeah, which then that was fine. Somehow that, and when that, by the way, disproportionately affected minorities.
Yeah.
No progressive seemed to care about that.
No
that
one
it was
cared.
overwhelmingly black people, wildly disproportionately black people and immigrants who just refused the vaccine. By the way, let the record show they were smarter than everybody else for doing it.
You know who else?
Me and you?
PhDs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That is an interesting detail, isn't it?
Overwhelmingly skeptical about this new vaccine.
And here, me and you got called out by Anthony Fauci and Joe Biden for fucking being right, for being absolutely right. I mean, it's so wild, too, that was only 3 years ago or 4 years ago when you said that your advice to young people was to just be really healthy. And that was like a national controversy.
Yeah.
That you just like, just think about how upside down
it was
everything
also
is.
people doing the man's job for the man. It was everybody piled on. Like everybody, and especially once you got the shot yourself, you're like, I did the right thing because you knew it was risky. You fucking know
on
it's
some
risky.
level too.
Absolutely, it's medication. Anytime you get medication, you know it's risky. Anytime you get some pharmaceutical drug in your system, not to mention some completely novel new way where it turns your entire body into a vaccine or an immunity-producing spike protein factory. By the way, which is the most toxic aspect of getting the disease is the spike protein, so your body's going to produce it itself. What?
Yeah.
PhDs were like, I don't know.
And it was also way past the point where we had already figured out that, like, if you weren't very old and very sick, this was statistically had almost no chance of like a serious
even more
negative
importantly,
outcome.
we had very long ago realized it wasn't a threat at all to kids.
Yep.
So there was no justification whatsoever to force kids to get vaccinated, and yet we did it. And California did it. They did it to schools. They did it everywhere. And the fact that they pulled that off, and then a couple of years later, they're like, you don't need an ID to vote?
Yeah.
Why do you need an ID to vote? That's racist. In California, you're not allowed to show ID. You're not allowed to show ID.
So, like, come on. I mean, listen, obviously this is, and like, there's a reason for all of this. It's not, they didn't just pick showing your ID voting and decide to make this the issue that they harped on and tried to pretend you were somehow racist or you were somehow infringing on voting rights by requiring an ID. And so, look, like, this did, a couple things happened. Number one, it totally turned public opinion against this level of crazy immigration. And number two, I mean, Donald Trump ended up winning a bigger percentage of the Latino vote than I believe any Republican in my life, which is really, I mean,
especially after Tony Hinchcliffe. That's pretty wild.
I think Tony Hinchcliffe, he might have gotten him more votes. It seemed like,
listen, nobody takes a joke better than Puerto Ricans, by the way.
It is, by the way, there is something really funny about that where, and this has been a theme for years in the country, but really, Tony was a great example of it, but where, like, for all their talk about diversity and anti-racism and all of this, what they always seem to do is try to impose white lady values on minorities. You know what I mean? Like, just imagine. Who's
a great way to put it? White lady values.
It's always white lady values. It's always, who's really offended by a joke?
Well,
as we both know, Joe, as professional comedians for many years, black people just get very offended by jokes. No, they fucking don't. That's white women. That's white women shit. That's not Latinos or African Americans. They're the ones who take a joke the best.
Especially a good joke.
Oh, yeah. But also, like, the more offensive, the better. Like, they love that shit. I mean, by and large, like, there's exceptions.
Well, there's exceptions for sure. But Puerto Ricans are known, like, if you grow up around Puerto Ricans, they're fun and they talk a lot of shit.
Yes.
It's part of the culture.
Yep. So it's like you're trying to, there's something about it that was always like, it's always the liberal push for diversity is always like, we want different shades of people in our culture.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it was never like, there was never a thing where it's like, oh, we're going to go into the hood and we're going to adopt your culture. Like, that's not what we're talking about.
Which is why they hate black Republicans.
Yep. That's a big part of it.
That's a problem. They go after black Republicans so hard. Even harder, I think, than they go after a lot of white Republicans.
Oh, in some cases, much more viciously. Yeah. I mean, and I think we talked about Candace Owens before. That's part of what her freaking, boot camp before pissing off all the Israeli supporters is that she's already been through the fire.
Yeah.
She's been an outspoken black female conservative. And that's like, they really hate that because they do kind of view you as like, which is fucked up in a way, but it really is kind of like they decided that they're the champion of women and black people, and therefore, if you're a black woman, it's your responsibility to support these liberal white women. You know,
she used to. That's the thing about Candace.
She went from
when
being
she was very young. She was liberal,
and she was also a hardcore Zionist at one point, like very big supporter of Israel, and then changed her mind on that. But it is. There is a viciousness with which those people get attacked. I do think, and I think I said this the last time we were on, the last time I was on, but I still do think that in many ways that's the best part of Donald Trump winning again is just the cultural phenomenon of it, where it does seem like there's been a big rejection of all of that shit. Mm-hmm. I had dinner with Daryl last night, with Daryl Cooper. And with Daryl Cooper and Scott Horton. And we were talking a little bit about this. But, like, what happened, first of all, I let the record show, for both good and bad, I was promoting Daryl Cooper before everybody else was. I was the first guy. Maybe not the first, but I was like, yo, this guy's podcast is amazing. And it really, really is. But there was something so interesting about, like, his Tucker appearance, the backlash against it, the fact that it did absolutely nothing to harm him and his podcast just shot up on all the charts and now more people than ever are listening to his stuff. Like there is like, and I've seen a lot of this and I've gotten into some arguments with some like Konstantin Kassin. I've argued with him about this. I respect him very much. I like him a lot. I think he's very smart. But there are like, there are these woke tactics now that are being used by many people who have been opposing wokeism for a very long time. And I think it's interesting how much people have woken up to that, no pun intended, but how much people like kind of recognize that now and that stuff has just been rejected. And even like on the most basic level, first of all, the fact that there was such an outrage for what Daryl Cooper said on Tucker Carlson's podcast already proves the point. It already proves the point that you're like, yeah, this is insane. This is insane that this, like, you can't even like have a conversation about these things without this massive pile-on.
Only that, these pejoratives that get is stuck on him, that got stuck on me for platforming him. Yeah. I read Joe Rogan had a Nazi apologist and Holocaust denier.
Well,
Or skeptic. I think they said Holocaust skeptic. I forget what term they use, but none of those things are true.
And none of them. I mean, he's got this big. I'm very excited for it, but he's putting together this big piece on World War II, and like none of them are going to come back and go, "Oh yeah, I got it wrong. I apologize."
No,
Because he's
they're
totally not doing that at all.
If they were, they would have listened to Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem.
Well, I said this to Konstantin when we were arguing about it on Twitter, and I go, "Listen, dude. Listen. Just take." I called it my non-woke challenge. I go, "Take my non-woke challenge, okay?" All it takes is an hour of your time. Listen to the first 30 minutes of Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem, and then listen to the 30 minutes in the he put out another piece after it. I forget the title of it, but it took from the history where Fear and Loathing left off up to like the 80s. And there was it started like around, or maybe it was part of Fear and Loathing. But anyway, he had a half-hour chunk that was on the Jews suffering in World War II. And I was like, so listen to these 2 half hours, and you tell me if it is conceivably possible that a Jew-hating Nazi sympathizer could have ever put this out. Because it's impossible. Like
Impossible.
It can't. And he goes, I have listened to it. And I was like, oh, well, then we can't talk anymore, Matt. I mean,
said he
not
had
in general,
listened to
but I was like,
really?
we can't talk about this anymore. I think there's something almost more simple that was like, look, if you listen to what Daryl said on Tucker's podcast, he essentially goes, I say this sometimes to get a rise out of my buddy who's like an Anglo-Saxon, and I'm kind of being hyperbolic when I say it, but I kind of say it to prod, but in some ways I think Churchill was the real villain of the war. Now, he didn't commit the most atrocities. I'm not saying he was the worst person there, but I think he's primarily responsible for this not being maybe like a little conflict in Poland and turning into like the big bloodbath that it did. Okay, say whatever you will about that. There's a fair argument to be there. I tend to think Daryl's right, but maybe he's not. But every single person who repeated that would go, he said Churchill was the real villain. And you're like, you know what, dude, we're not doing that anymore. Like we're not very fine people on both sides in this whole thing.
Right.
Like, come on, dude.
Right.
No, that's not what he fucking said. And you could take out all that other content, but any honest person looking at that just goes like, no, that's not what he said. And and I was on Piers Morgan's show. One more shout out to Piers, but even when he played the clip, he cut out all that context and just played the part where he says the real villain was Churchill. And you're like, I think people have, after so many years of this being the constant tactic to like it's like there's a giant rejection of that. And I think that's really good. And I think a lot of that has to do with Trump winning. Again, I mean, there's other factors involved too. But I do just think it's like these woke tactics of like where you call everyone who disagrees with you a racist or a bigot or this is just not, like we're not playing that game anymore. Or at least it seems like most people aren't playing that game anymore.
Yeah, it's not going to work anymore. And the people that have their minds made up, that have just knee-jerk reaction, are going to decide someone's a Nazi or someone's a Hitler apologist. They're not looking into it at all anyway. They have this cursory examination of the headline. Good enough. I'm going to run with it and I'm going to argue with it. There's always going to be people like that. But the majority of people are like, what is this all about? What did he actually say? Well, let me listen to his show. And then his show shoots up to number one.
Yeah.
And it shot up to number one again after he was on my podcast. The same kind of thing. It's like, it's a fucking great show. It's a great show. And it's not just great about Israel. It's not just great about World War II. His fucking thing on Jim Jones is insane.
So good.
It's so good. It's so insane. And he does that with everything. And he has empathy and compassion and a general desire to empathize and see how someone could join this cult, how Jim Jones could turn from this guy who was a civil rights leader.
Yeah.
He was a civil rights leader in the 1950s. I mean, this guy was living in a time where he had adopted a black child and was persecuted all throughout town because of it, and was genuinely like a real Christian. Then he's hopped up on meth. He's out of his fucking mind. Now he's in Guyana, and he's got a whole group of people with him. And he talks them all into killing themselves. And the ones who don't, he kills them. And yeah, it's a crazy tragedy. But what Daryl Cooper does is long-form editorial. Like you have to look at it from an editorial aspect, because it's opinion, but it's also information that he's citing his sources, and he's like, put yourself in these people's shoes, which is what he does so
Which is
well.
essentially his only like demand
Yeah.
It's through all of his work.
Yeah.
His only demand is like, listen, you have to, if you're going to listen to my work, you have to do your absolute best to put yourself in these Persian shoes and then put yourself in the other side's shoes.
Fear and loathing in New Jerusalem starts out with Jews being persecuted. Imagine these people are your neighbors.
Yep.
And he brings you through this horrific scenario that absolutely did happen to some of the people there.
And you don't, it's cool the way I mean, I don't spoiler alert or whatever, it's just the beginning, but it's so good. But like, you almost don't know what he's talking about at first. You're like, is this a Palestinian getting fucked over? Is this because the story's about, going in, this is going to be about the creation of the state of Israel or whatever. But then you realize like, oh no, this is a Jew in Eastern Europe going through a pogrom. And I will say this, right, as somebody who is fairly well read on the subject, compared to like the layman, not compared to Darryl Cooper. There's levels to this shit. It's like, I used to think Rich Franklin was the best striker in the world, and then Anderson Silva fought him, and you're like, oh, okay, he is not. By the way, Rich Franklin was great, but Anderson Silva was amazing. But listening to that series, it made me much more sympathetic to the Israelis, if I'm being honest. And I know I've heard that from other people too, but it does, because Darryl insists on doing that. Like, look, it's real, it's easy. Now, I'm not saying this is an excuse for anything. Like the Nakba in 1947, 1948 is horrible. It was a giant ethnic cleansing campaign, Okay, but if you do put this into context, like the year's 1947. Okay, first of all, just think about like even the attitudes of 1947 that of, like, just in terms of racism and things like that, like very different attitudes in 1947. Also, you're 2 years removed from the end of World War II, where the, quote, good guys in the story or the winners in the story are like Truman, who just firebombed Tokyo, dropped 2 nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the bombing of Dresden, the bombing of Berlin. Joseph Stalin is in the process, as this is happening, of ethnically cleansing millions of ethnic Germans all throughout Eastern Europe. This is only a couple years after Stalin's army raped their way through Europe. You know what I mean? And then, of course, there's the atrocities of the Nazis, and you're the Jewish people who just went through this Holocaust. And all of this is in the background, and you're going to say, you're telling me we can't move a few 100,000 people off their land to create our new state? Like, who's going to fucking morally lecture us about doing this little thing here? And like, I'm not saying any of that excuses it. And it wasn't the Palestinians' fault that any of that happened. And so like it is worthwhile. Like, that's what doing history should be, right? Yes. It should be like understanding that these were real human beings. These aren't cartoon monsters. There was now they may have done monstrous shit, but like there was something, going on there. And there was kind of like, I think it's just beneficial to understand all of that stuff. And, Menachem Begin, who is like the worst, like was a straight up terrorist. And in that series, if you remember, he talks a lot about like how the evil shit that Menachem Begin and the Ergon and the Stern Gang and the Haganah, all the shit they did. And they were just straight up terrorists. That's what they were doing. Terrorism in order to drive out an occupying force. You can't make this shit up, is what led to the creation of Israel. And now they're like,
kind of universally regarded as terrorist groups.
Oh, you just self-admitted terrorist groups. Like, we're committing acts of terrorism. There were debates about whether we should embrace terrorism or not. And the side saying we should embrace terrorism won the day. This is how Chaim Weizmann, he was supposed to be the David Ben-Gurion. He was the #1 ranked Zionist at the time. And he stood up and was like, yo, we can't do this. We can't embrace terrorism. Like, his thing was like, we can't achieve a Jewish state by un-Jewish means, and which he considered terrorism to be. Like, this violates our religion. We can't do this. But even him, there was this one point, which I had never heard before, but I learned it from Darryl Cooper's series. I think it was probably one of the things that stuck with me the most, was that if you remember, it's right toward the end. It's when they're doing they're doing the King David Hotel bombing, and they're doing all this terrorism to try to drive the British out. And at one point, the British like caught a few of the, I can't remember if it was from the Ergon or the Lehigh, but it was from one of those 2 militias, and they caught a few of their guys, and they like publicly flogged them or something like that. And then Menachem Begin and his terrorist boys, they got a few of like the British soldiers, and they fucking flogged the shit out of them and then killed them and then booby trapped the bodies so that it fucking blew up more people when they came to try to get it back. And then now he's a wanted man at this time, Menachem Begin, so he's like living underground. And so he did like a radio address. And in his radio address, he was like, he said something like, he was like, hey, just so you know, Jews don't get flogged anymore. We do the flogging now. And look, this guy was a bad guy. He was a fucking terrorist. But there is something so badass about that there is a part of you that's just like, whew, like you can kind of understand a people going through this fucking collective struggle and then getting to a point where they're like, we will be the ones inflicting struggle from now on, not the ones receiving it.
Right.
And look, I still come out on the side that I think Israel's treatment of the Palestinians is horrible and inexcusable, and I favor a two-state solution. I think America should stop funding Israel. But I think it's nothing but beneficial to kind of like understand that perspective a little bit more. And even though I kind of grew up on the pro-Israel propaganda and then ultimately rejected it, that was Daryl's effect on me. Was being like, there is like, I'm seeing the humanity in the Israeli side a little bit more.
Yes.
So give me a fucking break about these people saying like he's some fucking neo-Nazi drumming up Jew hatred. It's just not true.
Yeah, they just have established boundaries of what you're allowed to talk about.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And there's narratives that can't be breached. You have to follow it to a T, and that's it. That's it. And anything else, you're anti-Semite. And he's labeled all over the place. I'm sure his Wikipedia calls him that. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just there's so many people that have really irresponsibly done that and defamed him, and it's fucked up. But ultimately, it doesn't work. It just makes him bigger.
I 100% agree. And then I also think that it's almost like it's very obvious. I think if you're looking at it with clear eyes, that it's like, look, I'm Jewish, and I don't wish to see a rise in people hating Jewish people. Like that, obviously, I'd be opposed to that. But if you're gonna say that anybody who criticizes the government of Israel or anybody who criticizes the Israeli lobby and the unbelievable influence that has over our government, and you're going to label all of them as anti-Semites, like, all right, I would think that it would be wiser to at least be thankful that there are people who are not Jew haters who are pointing this out, rather than just leaving it to all the Jew haters to be the only ones who are pointing this out. Like, it's like, you think Daryl Cooper is like, okay, like, what's your goal here? To shut him down? Who do you think's going to replace him? You better hope that they're going to be as thoughtful and responsible as he is. Right. And they probably won't be, because not too many people are.
But that's how it always is, right? I mean, this is the problem with suppression. The problem, it's essentially a version of the same problem of creating terrorists. You attack because you think you're going to stop the terrorism, you just create more terrorism. Yep. You think you're going to stop people from expanding the narrative and talking outside of these borders that you've clearly established for how people are able to discuss certain sensitive topics. No, you're not. You're not going to do that. You're just going to make people realize that there's a third rail, and they don't understand why there's a third rail. And then they start looking into it, and they go, oh, how much influence does Israel have on our country? And then they start asking those kind of questions. And this gives way to the rise of anti-Semitism. I think suppression of people's ability to talk about very polarizing topics like Gaza, suppression of that is a cause of anti-Semitism, because people start thinking, like, is there some sort of grand plan to control us and keep me from being able to talk about something that clearly is in the news every day? It seems like a big issue.
Yeah. Well, there's also like, to the thing, literally, this is my origin story of being the guy that I am now, being obsessed with all this stuff, was seeing Ron Paul versus Rudy Giuliani in 2007 at the Republican primary debate. And Rudy Giuliani's arguing about how the terrorists hate us for our freedom. And then Ron Paul, who I'd never heard of, just like this country doctor from Texas with an R next to his name, starts going like, no, they don't hate us for our freedom. They hate us because we're over there. Like, how would we feel if somebody else was doing to us what we're doing to them? And then Rudy Giuliani is like, that's a pretty absurd explanation that the reason they did 9/11 is because we were bombing Iraq. And he goes, I've heard a lot of absurd explanations for 9/11, and I've never heard anything that ridiculous. which, by the way, was in Osama bin Laden's declaration of war on America. So like to be like, I've never heard of this is not quite the brag or flex that you think it is. And then Ron Paul just fucking schooled him and was like, he was like, you know who came up with the term blowback? The CIA, because it's a real thing. Yeah. There is blowback. And if we think we can go around the world and do whatever we want to people, and that's not going to incite hatred, we do that at our own peril. Like, let's be honest. But for whatever reason, for me, it was always kind of just easy to connect that. Like I remember, you remember there was the scene in Good Will Hunting where like at the end when he breaks him and he's like, it's not your fault, it's not your fault, and he starts crying. But he finally gets him to start talking about the abuse he went through in his childhood. And Matt Damon's character is talking about it, and he's like, oh, he used to lay like a stick, a belt, and a wrench on the table and tell me to pick. And Robin Williams was like, I'd have to go with the stick on that one. And he goes, I used to pick the wrench. And he was like, why would you pick the wrench? And he goes, because fuck him, that's why. And like, okay, there's something about that was always very easy for me to understand. Like, you just get to a point where it's like, yeah, because fuck you. It's like, why would some Palestinian who's, let's say there's an Israeli who kicks him out of his house that his grandfather built, that his family's been living in for 100 years. And now that Israeli guy is living in his house. And you're watching from like a refugee camp, this guy live in your house. And as Daryl says in the series, he goes, now you have no means by which to give that house back to your grandmother. But you could burn that house to the fucking ground. And like, it's easy to look there and go, but why would you do that? That's irrational. It's like, no, not really. It's really not. Because it's picking the wrench. It's going, because fuck you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there, like all of these things, there's always like reactionary movements. And like, so again, like this, it's say, okay, yes, you're going to sit here and for fucking 15 years tell young white men that they're toxic and they're the problem and their masculinity is inherently wrong. What do you think's going to come out of that? And then like the same people are like, where did this Andrew Tate guy pop up from? And you're like, you made him. You made him. If you wanted to make him, you couldn't have done a better job. Look, that's the whole fucking story of the Nazis to begin with, that we imposed the Treaty of Versailles and insisted on internationally humiliating these people and crushing them. And then where'd these Nazis come from? It has a reaction to that, obviously. Yeah.
And we never learn. That's what's fucked. Do you think we're going to learn more now? I mean, you have to realize, if you're thinking about history, this is the first time where people have this kind of access to all the different layers that are in operation all over the world. And if you're paying attention, and most people aren't, but if you're paying attention, you have a much broader understanding of all the things that are at play than ever before, and how these things could be avoided. And I think that's one of the reasons why people were excited about Trump getting into office, when he was saying, I can stop that war in one day. We can make deals. There's deals that can be made. You know, we can stop all the killing stuff. Everybody was like, yeah, finally someone is not going to do it the way we've done it before.
I think I'm incredibly like optimistic on a long like time period. I think that, like exactly what you just said, I mean, it's the propaganda apparatus has been completely destroyed. Like, it's just not, there's been this, I really do think a massive awakening. There's several factors to this. I think COVID is the biggest single one. You know, I think that there was something about imposing such draconian measures on the domestic population. Like, look, we start a lot of wars over bullshit, but the truth is, for most Americans, that's kind of over there somewhere, and we're living our lives, and, like, you might be against it, but it's a different thing than, like, instituting totalitarianism in the United States of America, which lockdowns were, objectively. And they did it, it's not just that they got it all wrong, it's that it was, they were fucking lying. Like, you motherfuckers made the thing, and you knew you did, and then you covered it up. Like, now this is like everywhere. It's like the shit that we used to talk about a few years ago that was like the controversial, conversations. Everyone's talking about them now. It was just Bill Maher the other day brought up that, like, hey, how crazy is it that we figured out that British intelligence in March of 2020 said that, I forget what it was, but they said with 85% certainty this came from the lab, and then so they did all of this and they got it completely wrong, and they were so full of shit that spell's been broken. People see this now. I do think you're right that there was like a tremendous look, as Ron Paul used to always say, the peace candidate always wins. I mean, like in the year 2000, George W. Bush, he campaigned on a humble foreign policy. No nation building, no using our police, not being the policeman of the world with our military. People remember that's what he ran and won on. Barely won, but still he won on that. And then in 2004, John Kerry refused to run against the war, and that's why he wasn't able to win. And then in 2008, Barack Obama ran on a peace campaign, destroyed Hillary Clinton in the primary, who had all the institutional money, all the big support behind her, but she had voted for the war in Iraq. And Obama said, hey, that was a big mistake. You can't give her the presidency when she made such a big mistake. And people went, you know what? That's right. And even though he wasn't in the Senate yet when the war in Iraq was going on, he didn't vote for the thing. And he said some beautiful things about closing Gitmo and ending torture and not fighting stupid wars. And he won, like a dominant victory. And then in 2016, Donald Trump ran and won on, we're going to stop fighting these stupid wars. And then in 2024 again, he wins on this. Like, the American people have spoken. Now, that's a very different thing than the regime machinery itself. So that's a different, battle. But the battle of public opinion on that has been won. And then I do think, even though Jamie told us before the show started that they're saying Elon Musk is going to be stepping away from Doge soon. And yes, it's true that Doge didn't actually get any drastic cuts through. But it is amazing what they have done in terms of like bringing to the cultural forefront the issue of how corrupt government is. And so anyway, my long-term thing is that I think corrupt regimes, which unfortunately we live under one, I think they are completely dependent on propaganda. And that propaganda just broke. We're just getting out of that now. Yeah. And I think there's like amazing possibilities. Dude, I mean, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I couldn't have imagined we'd be here now. Like, I just couldn't imagine that, like, the COVID restrictions have been completely defeated. Wokeism seems to have been, like, pretty much defeated. This is already just incredible.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's interesting. And there's a lot of possibilities. It could go a bunch of different ways. Yeah. And there's also examples of it going sideways, like what's happening in the UK and what's happening in other parts of Europe, where the totalitarian measures are ramping up. And they didn't win the war on woke. In fact, they lost that war.
That's true.
They lost that war. And I think that's a shining example of the difference between what we tolerate in America. Having the First Amendment, having that freedom of speech, and then also having the Second Amendment, the ability to back that up. People are, you're going to use your. I mean, I remember even Biden was talking about that. You're gonna fight a fucking jet with your rifles. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, no, but guess what? You can't just do what they did in Australia and ship people off to camps in America.
Yeah.
Try that shit in Georgia.
Well, it's so stupid, too, because number one, the Taliban just did that to you, sir. Like, literally, you just pulled out in disgrace of a war that you couldn't win against a bunch of illiterate goat herders with rifles. So,
not only that, we left behind billions of dollars of weapons.
They got a lot more rifles now.
And they go on parades with them, where they're driving tanks down the street and flying over fucking Blackhawks.
But of course, the point is that, well, yes, if the U.S. military decided to nuke its own, population, yes, you're right, our guns wouldn't do any good. But the point is that that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to rule us. And of course, having guns. I don't know, by the way, let's say the Jews in Nazi Germany had been well armed, would that have been enough to stop the Holocaust? Or if the Ukrainians had been well armed, would that have been enough to stop the genocide that Stalin inflicted on them or whatever? But I'd be better they are than not. I don't know. It might at least give them a second to go well, we can't go, And the truth is, if you were to just think the state that we're in right now, it's what? Let's say they were just tomorrow, some leader was we're rounding up all the guns in Texas. No, you're fucking not. Good luck. Yeah. You'll have a civil war on your hands. These people are not giving up their guns voluntarily. And the thing about people who won't give up their guns voluntarily is if you try to force them to it, they have guns.
Especially if they think you're going to shoot them.
Yeah.
If you're coming with guns, they have guns. Now you have a fight.
Yeah. That's right.
And it's terrifying. And then you're paying someone to go do that. That's a regular person. Like
Yep.
this is the thing about people in the army or in the police. These are just regular folks
Who tend to lean right wing and tend to like guns and the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Who may not be so keen on, taking away the Second Amendment.
No, and they'll understand that this is a totalitarian measure, and that what's going to happen is it's going to be the collapse of what we understand of as America. We think of America in terms of our ability to express ourselves first and our ability to defend ourselves.
Yeah. No, that's why it's number one and number two. And it's not to say that this is the entire reason, because obviously things like there's many different variables and factors, and it's a complicated history. But a huge part of the reason why America is the most prosperous, most successful country and has largely been the freest country in the history of the world is because of that. Because the first thing we enshrined in our Bill of Rights was like, listen, man, the government is, and it's not. It's not what the people are allowed to do. It's what the government is not allowed to do to the people. Congress shall write no law. Period. Like this is like it's the fact that this is the only country in the history of the world that was started on that premise and then has gone on to be the most dominantly successful country in the history of the world is not a coincidence.
No, it's not. This is freedom's last battleground.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're in the middle of it right now. We're in the middle of it in a weird transitionary time where things are being exposed at a level that have never been exposed before. And people have an understanding of how corrupt this system is at a way they've never been able to fully comprehend before. You have an uncle that tells you, what they do is the CIA sends people. Uncle's crazy. That guy's out of his fucking mind. Then Mike Benz explains it to you and shows you charts and graphs and brings up articles and has classified documents that have been released, and he's showing you those. You're like,
yeah. Well, I mean, his stuff, and I mean, look, like the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. I mean, it's just like again,
all of it in every category that you could imagine. Just what's happening with the American Heart Association, trying to get people to be able to buy sugary drinks and crap food with food stamps, and then you realize, oh wait, look, these companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi have actually donated to the American Heart Association.
Yeah,
and
evidently some Twitter influencers too.
Oh yeah, a bunch
of them. Did you see that?
Yeah,
who have all taken in that big Pepsi money, and then they're going, it is an assault on liberty to tell people they cannot buy Pepsi.
So many people that have prominent X accounts and prominent, I'm sure, other social media platforms as well. They all said the same thing, and they're probably being paid because a bunch of people were being paid to support Kamala Harris, and there was a bunch of people that exposed that. They showed the emails that they got. We were invited to do this, and you would get paid like a considerable amount of money to make some sort of a statement saying that you would vote for that person. And I guess they said, well, if you have 500,000 followers here and 1 million followers there, and you add all those up and you give this guy 25 grand, this guy 50 grand, and you give Beyonce 11 million.
Yeah, by the way, I hear constantly people when they attack me on Twitter that I'm getting Russian money or Qatari money. I've never got a goddamn check from any of them. Like, guys, give me the money. I'm already saying the thing, I think. So, like, hey, why not at this point? I'm just kidding. I don't want your money.
Well, I get it all the time. People think that someone's guiding this show, and that I have someone who tells me what to talk about. Like, I would have never had Kurt Metzger on yesterday if that's the case.
That's when you know no one's guiding anything. When Kurt Metzger, who I love dearly.
About everybody. He was screaming about Elon. He was screaming about everybody.
I love Kurt Metzger dearly. I've known him for over 20 years. He's one of the most brilliant comedic minds in the world. But let's be real. Nobody, if anyone was guiding anyone with a show, they would never allow Kurt Metzger to be on that show. Anytime he appears on a show, that is proof that there is no big money behind this show.
Well, the scary thing for people is that there's not a guide, and that it really is the Wild West out here, and that's real. This show is a great example of that. Because this is the #1 show in the world, and this show is literally me and my phone.
It's very interesting for me from my perspective, and I'm sure much more for you. But like from my perspective, it's just that, like somebody who's like a regular and a good friend of yours and has been on the show many times. I mean, I get constantly people will always come up to me and ask, "Oh, what's Joe Rogan really like?" Which is always an interesting question to me because it's like, and I always say my answer is always, I go, "But you already know." Like, you already know what Joe Rogan's like. If you watch the show, you already know what Rogan. It's more of that. Like, I don't know. It's that, or it's, you know, like, I'm not saying like there's not like any element of like something you might tell a close friend that you wouldn't say publicly, but like generally speaking, and this is true, by the way, almost with all of my favorite comedians. You know, people be like, "What was Patrice O'Neill like?" You'd be like,
Right.
"Like Patrice O'Neill,
Yeah.
like exactly the guy
That
you
guy.
saw. He was
Yeah.
that. A
Shane
lot more
Gillis,
of that.
same
Shane
guy.
Gillis is exactly like that. It's just
Yeah.
always the case." But it was really interesting. At least I don't know. It was just so entertaining for me after this last election when it was almost like they finally had to admit the power that you have, you know, because like for all those years, and we would always make fun of it over the years, but like Brian Stelter would be on CNN and he'd be like, "The fringe Joe Rogan is over here. He's very controversial." And you'd be like, "Controversial?" It's like, he's got 15 million people listening to his show and you're struggling to break 200,000. How do you get to say he's fringe, you know? Like, but it's almost like they had to admit after this last election, they're like, "Oh," and then the way they start going, "Well, we need our own Joe Rogan, or we need our own this." And it's just, I don't know, it's very interesting where it's like, man, talk about like, you guys just don't get it.
Well, my
You
favorite one was there was a guy on CNN saying that there's a well-funded network of right-wing influencers that are organized. And they were trying to make this argument.
And who are the people like Theo and you?
Jen Psaki was trying to make this argument with Jon Stewart.
Oh, yeah. And
Did you see
Stewart
that?
called her out
Yeah.
and he was like, "Yeah, no, that's not right."
No, she was like, well, it's a right-wing movement. She's like, it's more of a comedian libertarian movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Which
what
is,
it
I think, is more like, you know, I think generally speaking, like, you know, as you've always said, you're kind of a mix of like some kind of more sympathetic to left-wing ideas, some more sympathetic to right-wing ideas, some sympathetic to libertarian ideas. But it's just so, especially like if you just know the people involved, like to describe you and Theo Vaughn as a right-wing network.
Organized.
It's the most disorganized thing in the history of the world.
Organized and well-funded. I'm not organized, and I guess I'm well-funded, but it's not for that.
No, but it's
no one
from
tells
having
me,
the audience.
Yeah, but it's also, it's like no one tells me anything. Like, I can have on UFO people, I can have on comedians. No, there's no feedback. I have no feedback. There's no exchange between me and Spotify in terms of who you got this week. What's the month look like? Tell us the big names. They started at the beginning of the deal. They said, okay, who's going to be the people the first week? And my manager's like, hey, it's the same show. You bought the number one show in the country. He's not doing anything different. And they're like, well, we would like to get some big names out of the gate. Like,
Yeah. Like, that's just not, that's not what we do here.
No,
you know?
I'm not going to change. It's the same show.
But the thing, it's such a funny thing because it is almost like, it's like you know, it's like somebody in a marriage, you know, like the corporate media, I'd say they're like in a marriage and they're just lying through their teeth to their spouse. They're constantly cheating on them. They're getting caught left and right. Then they're saying, no, it wasn't that. It was you and you're the bad person and all this. And they're just like the worst, most dishonest, fucking obvious liars. And then they're like looking over at like someone in a healthy marriage and they're like, so what's that guy's trick? Like, how does he do it? And you're like, it's like, he just doesn't lie to her. He's nice to her. And like, I don't know. Like, it's just like, the thing is, the big secret is that you're authentic and just say what you mean and invite the people on who you're interested in talking to. And that was like the antidote to your insane tyrannical bullshit.
It's also that I started it not for money. I started it for fun, and it didn't make money for years. And I was independently wealthy. Like, I had money from Fear Factor,
Right.
and I had money from stand-up comedy. I was like, I didn't have like a crazy lifestyle. I was like, I'm fine. Like, this is fun to do. I'm just going to do this. And then it just got big.
And it was so new.
And I never
yeah.
changed it. I just kept doing it. I made it better, got better cameras.
Yeah,
You know?
that was it. No, it's
Got a
funny.
studio.
Sometimes you'll look back at those old episodes and you're like, holy shit, that's grainy. I don't remember it being that grainy, but it was
Well,
compared to
cameras
this.
were terrible back then. And we just used regular webcams that you go to Fry's Electronics and buy. We just like regular fucking USB microphone in the beginning, plug it into a MacBook. The whole thing was so janky. It was
Yeah.
like, and now, you know, they think somehow or another because it's big, well, it's been infiltrated. It's not that I haven't been offered. People have tried to buy percentages of the show and give me large sums of money. And I'm like,
Yeah. That's I'm glad you didn't make that decision.
Once you have fuck you money, you better say fuck you. Because if you don't, you're not, you're ruining one of the most beautiful gifts the universe can bestow upon a person, to never be beholden to money anymore, to just be able to like be yourself, to do what you like to do.
Tucker Carlson said about me once, and I thought it was like one of the best compliments I've ever gotten, and it really meant a lot to Tucker, who's someone I really admire a lot. But it was I think Patrick Bet-David, if I'm remembering correctly, he was on and it was before like the debate with Cuomo had been announced, but it was before it happened. And Patrick was like, how do you think that's gonna go? And Tucker was like, look, man, he's like, the thing about Dave is he is just totally unencumbered by any restraints. You know, like there's no, I mean, I think what he meant was just like, there's no one who's like cutting his check. There's no one who's like, there's nothing that holds him back. Like I get to do the biggest show in the world a lot because you like what I have to say. And so then that's it. It's not like there's no, I feel no like, man, I wish I could say this, but I really can't say that. And there's something about that is like, that's the new thing. And I'll say, I think you, and look, this is what's really crazy, right? Like the impact of what you did during this election going forward is going to be, and I know you don't like when I like suck your dick too much, but I'm just saying, there's the fact that Trump did the show, got such a great response from it. Kamala Harris refused and then tried to get you to change what the show was, and then obviously in hindsight, like, oh, you know, the conventional wisdom is you really should have done that. The new normal now going forward for presidential elections is going to be that the expectation is that you can, and not just your show. I'm not saying like you have to have the candidates on every single 4 years, although I think you should, but that's your choice, obviously. But the new expectation, the expectation used to be that 2 or 3 times a presidential candidate is going to have to go do one of these CNN debates where they will be asked these like very narrow questions. They'll have 90 seconds to respond. You know, it'll be Obama. You know, how do you feel we do this in the war on terrorism? Be like, well, first of all, thank you. And thank you for coming out. And we appreciate
That's
this.
pretty
And
good.
fluff and bullshit and blah, blah, blah. And then hope and change.
Glass of water?
Just saying, yeah, like, but nothing, just emptiness. Nothing happens. And now the expectation is that you got to go have an organic, unscripted 3-hour conversation and probably do it a few different times with a few of the big shows. And you get, you know, like you get to kind of see that person in a whole different way than we've ever gotten to see presidential candidates before. And the truth is that a candidate like Kamala Harris will never be a major party nominee again. A candidate who is what was her running mates? Walz. Tim Walz. These guys are not, because they're not built for that. The future is going to be guys like J.D. Vance, guys like Vivek Ramaswamy, guys like Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard. And by the way, maybe the Democrats will find somebody in there. You know, you wouldn't have predicted Donald Trump in 2012.
Gavin Newsom is trying to do that.
I don't think it's going to be him.
He wants it to be him so bad.
Yeah, and that's
why
the
he's
problem.
doing his podcast. And he's doing a podcast where I'm inviting everybody on.
Well, he's at least right for doing that.
Everybody, come on in, whoever you are. I'm inviting them all.
Hey, Gavin, invite me on. We'll have a nice chat.
He probably would.
I'll do it.
He had Steve Bannon on.
Gavin, Mr. Newsom, Governor Newsom, I would be honored to be on your show. We can have a nice civil conversation about the issues.
He'll probably have you on right now. He'll probably hear that and reach out to you.
Look, I will give him credit for this. He is at least smart enough that like that is the move, is to go do a podcast and start interacting and try to figure out. I think the issue that Gavin Newsom has is he is a very talented old school politician. Yeah. And I think that archetype has been rejected.
Yes.
And that's going to be very tough. I think that going forward, like, you know, you saw, I don't know if you saw recently, it was a few weeks ago, Bernie Sanders and AOC had like a few big rallies, and they're drawing like, you know, tens of thousands of people to these rallies. Now, I don't think either of them are going to be the nominee.
I don't think they're really drawing those people.
Well, that also might be. That also is probably true.
Do you know they got the cell phone data from those things?
Yes, no, I know, and I've seen that, and they are probably pretty artificial. But still, there is no way. Like, no one's reading Chuck Schumer's new book. No one cares about Nancy Pelosi. Like, the establishment wing is not going to be what the future is. It's going to have to be some populist.
It's going to be Jasmine Crockett.
I'm not sure she's the one.
Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jasmine Crockett in a cage fight.
Let's go, dude. That's your old bit from Talking Monkeys in Space, where you're just like, we could go dumber.
Yeah,
just keep getting it dumber and dumber. So this is the level now.
It's fucking idiocracy.
Maybe you really predicted the future.
Yeah, I definitely did. That was about George Bush getting us into Iraq. He won again. How did he win again? And then someone in the back of the room going, I think we can go dumber.
And he's right.
And he was 100% right with Tim Walz. I mean, that guy was almost the vice president of the United States. I'm sure you've seen that thing where it shows Obama saying, I need a vice president that's dumber than me.
Yeah.
And then it's Biden, and
I think I
Biden
was
saying,
that
I
on
need
your,
a vice president dumber than me.
Great.
And it's
so
Kamala,
perfect.
and Kamala saying, I need a vice president dumber than me. And it's Walz.
No, this is why
men have tampons.
Yeah, you gotta lose because we got to break this cycle. We're getting way too dumb. You need to regroup.
It wasn't just that we were getting dumb. We were getting scary close to people justifying totalitarian measures. You know what? Tim Walz in the campaign trail was literally saying free speech doesn't include hate speech and misinformation. Hey, man, fuck you.
Yeah.
How about fuck you? Because everything that we called misinformation just a few years ago is now being fucking it's on the front page of the New York Times now that we were lied to. I mean, the New York Times just printed a thing. It turns out we were lied to. Yeah, you lied to us. Yeah. You were a part of it.
Yep.
You spit out all of their propaganda without doing what you're actually supposed to do, which is be a journalist.
Yep. No,
the only way you can be a journalist today is if you're independent. A real journalist, you have to be a Glenn Greenwald. You have to be a Schellenberger. You have to be a Matt Taibbi. You have to be someone who's independent. That's the only way you could do real journalism today. There's just too many fucking guardrails.
Dude, Glenn Greenwald, who is debatably the greatest journalist of the 21st century, maybe I'd give it to Julian Assange, but he's up there. He had to leave the publication that he was a founder of.
Yeah.
You know, The Intercept.
Yeah.
Right? He had to leave them because they were going the route of propaganda and not letting him tell the truth about Joe Biden. And it's a testament to Glenn Greenwald that he was just like, okay, cool, bye. Yeah. And I'll go be just as big without you guys. That's
crazy.
That's another thing that's really interesting about like this, which is very recent though, right? That there was a time like where like cancel culture was so effective. I remember thinking this was something that really kind of scared me like a few years ago because it was like, you know, you'd have these people, like some of the people who kind of started getting like big like before me. I mean, I was doing what I do, but I had a slower like progression. But like some of these people who shot up to the top, you know, Milo or like people like that got totally removed from the conversation. Yes. Like it was like they were just taken out.
He's the best example.
Yeah, well, this guy was going to be the guy.
He was on
and then
Bill Maher show.
Yeah, and did great on Bill Maher show.
Compared him to Hitchens.
Yeah,
remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
like a gay Christopher Hitchens or something like that.
Something like that.
And now it just seems all over the place. There's lots of examples of it where it's like they try to. I mean, they've tried. I mean, you went through I think the biggest cancellation attempt where they were just like, you could see it was like, I remember in those few weeks where it was like a decision had been made. We're going after Joe Rogan. And they just emptied every bullet they had and it all just bounced off you. And then you see this with like a lot of other people like, you know, Alex Jones, Andrew Tate, you know, however you feel about these guys. I'm not even making a comment on.
You just make them bigger.
I'm just saying that them getting kicked off every platform has not worked at all. And
it doesn't work anymore.
And that's great. And Daryl's another example of that too, where they tried to go after him and it just was like not happening, just made him bigger.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So they're going to have to adjust or go away, adjust or perish. And I assume they're going to perish. I don't see them adjusting. The only thing that could change is the people that own them, like Jeff Bezos has kind of put the clamps down on the Washington Post and said, look, I don't want any of these fucking crazy left-wing opinion pieces anymore. I want you to report about lifestyle, health, news, objective news. Like, let's become a fucking newspaper again, which is that's the only way you have value with everybody. Otherwise, you're alienating literally 50% of the country, and the 50% that buy it, they have to be retarded because you've been lying so openly about so many different things. Everything has to be gone through a filter.
And
everything.
It's so like it's not even just that they're lying, but that they're lying in such a brazen, such a 180 degree from reality. You know, like the way they've tried to make this threat of Doge. You know, like where they're just kind of like, you know, what right does he have to go through all these bureaucrats' emails and when you zoom out, it reminds me a lot. There's this weird parallel between like what Bobby Kennedy was able to insert with the Maha movement, where you had this thing where we had like what they'd call a national health crisis, you know, a pandemic, like all of our focus has to be on this health issue. And then Bobby Kennedy just kind of came along and was like, could I point out that like there's a real health crisis that we have that's not the one you're talking about at all? Like, you're claiming to care about health so much, and it's like, okay, look at autism and diabetes and obesity, and like we lead the world in chronic illness, heart disease, like all these things. Like, that's kind of, and then it was just the Doge thing. It was like, okay, so we have the U.S. federal government is the biggest organization in the history of the world. We spend more than any other government in the history of the world has ever spent. We are so far in debt now that the interest on the debt is now, I believe last year it was $1.2 trillion, and it's going up.
Yeah.
And the interest on the debt is now overtaking the entire budget. Like, I remember when trillion-dollar deficits were crazy. If we balanced our budget tomorrow, we still run $1 trillion deficit every year just because we owe it on the interest on the debt. This is so obviously a crisis. And then they're trying to convince you that the real crisis is that Elon Musk and a few of his genius nerd buddies want to open the books? Like, how the fuck can you convince anyone of that?
Well, the Democrats are really good at having a narrative and then marching with it.
Yeah.
They're really good at it. And that's what you see with all these tweets that are all from the same kind of verbiage. They're using the same sentences, and you see them all throughout. Whenever it comes to certain issues, they're really good at staying united and getting out this one message.
Yeah, which does work to kind of shockingly well, but again, it is like you can watch it like it's like this thing that's getting diminishing returns, and it's like, oh, it's not the same old thing isn't working anymore.
We're also in this big Manhattan Project style race to create sentient AI. And that's another issue that's going to completely transform society. If you think the internet and podcast transform society, just wait till you have super intelligent, godlike computers that are telling us what we should do.
Yeah, and there's there's some pretty spooky implications of all of that. I mean, I've read a decent amount about the way like the IDF was using artificial intelligence to like track like suspects and stuff like this, and you're like, oh, like the military using AI is kind of creepy. But then at the same time, what might that do to like people's ability to keep secrets and keep corruption going? And it's kind of like, who gets in charge of that is going to be that's going to be like the fate of mankind.
Well, I think they're prepping for that. That's why they're jailing politicians. Like, there's a lot of that going on right now where they're in a hot panic because you're not going to be able to hide anything anymore. It's going to come in waves. And it's going to be, I mean, I'm just guessing what its impact is going to be, but I think the world's unrecognizable in 20 years.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Probably right about that. And it's it's going to be very interesting. I remember you said like a long time ago, I think it was like at the very beginning of the podcast, but you had said one thing where like you were like, it's going to be harder and harder to lie. Yeah. Like, that's just going to be the future where it's just harder and harder to lie. And you're talking about just like even how much right now, like, like I was born in 1983. So I grew up in like the 80s and the 90s, and like you could lie back then. Mm-hmm. You could just tell lies.
You could make up stories.
You could make up whatever. I used to do this. I was the head of this. I worked at this company. Just say that. Just
have
say
a narrative.
It was just totally like, and you were just like, I don't know. I mean, he says it. Yeah. There's no way to really check that. And now it's like you just say like, oh, I used to do this. It's like, no, you didn't. You know what I mean? Like that. That's a crazy shift thing. That it happens slow enough that you don't run. But the more that goes on, and the more technology there is, and the more with the like singularity type shit, or the more like it's gonna become increasingly more and more difficult to deceive people. At least that would be my guess.
There's going to be an app in our lifetime that's a lie detector, and it's going to be 100%. It's going to read your retinas. It's going to look at your eyeballs, and you're going to use it just the same way you use FaceTime, and you're going to have to talk to your boss through that thing, and it's going to be able to tell you, what did you do? What did you actually do? Where's the money? Why is money missing?
Oh, imagine that just like on politicians, though.
Yeah. Oh, boy, it's going to be great. Get that bitch on Nancy Pelosi.
Because I just happen to be really good at picking stocks.
Too bad Dick Cheney's dead. Would you like to stick him in front of that thing?
No, he's still alive.
Isn't he?
Is it Dick Cheney?
I thought he died.
No,
Dick Cheney still alive?
Dick Cheney is alive.
Is he?
Yeah, no, somebody. I think somebody else. I'm trying to think of who's the guy who died.
One of the big ones died.
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, someone real evil did die, but that guy's
What's that? Wow,
Yeah,
he's still
no, that
alive
guy's-
with another dude's heart.
still alive with another dude's heart.
Ooh, isn't it crazy? All these people died from COVID, and that fucking guy's just still kicking
Yeah, well,
with
the
a fake heart.
thing about making the deal with the devil is, you get paid off.
At one point in time, he had no pulse. He had something that was just circulating blood through his body, and he didn't have a pulse.
yeah, it's
That's
fucking
got to be in the
wild.
Bible.
Yeah. No, there's definitely something to that.
A guy
So
responsible for 1 million innocent people dying who doesn't have a pulse.
and can you imagine? It's just crazy. Like, and I don't know how much he was acting on his own, or they were.
Oh, McCain's dead.
John McCain is dead. He's
Yeah,
been gone for a
he's
while.
Dead. Why did I think that Cheney was dead?
I feel like there's somebody else but maybe not. But you know what's
Rumsfeld?
crazy?
Did Rumsfeld just die?
I'm not sure.
There was a fake report earlier this year that Dick Cheney died.
Oh, maybe
what
that's
is.
it.
They got me.
Yes, they got you with a scam.
They got me to fake one.
But isn't it crazy that like there's a million examples of this, but just like how tone deaf the Kamala Harris campaign was. Now I don't know how much Dick Cheney but Liz Cheney they started
that's
bringing
right,
on
because
the trail.
Dick Cheney endorsed her.
He came out
That's
to
right.
endorse it and say that Donald Trump is the most dangerous threat to America, and then she started campaigning with Liz Cheney, like as if. I mean, it's just forget even like the fact that obviously like I'm the anti-war guy and I think all these people are blood-soaked monsters who should burn in hell for eternity. But leave all that aside. Just the politics of it. Liz Cheney lost her congressional race by like 50 points. What market is there? Like what margin on the edges did they think like, I know what'll move this. Okay, we're down, but we're not out. Bring in the Cheneys. And then we're going to tell them about how much we love fucking the war in Iraq or something like that. And I think it was just a signal to like military contractors to be like, hey, we're cool, like send us some more money.
Internally, apparently, they already knew they were losing.
Yeah, they said
Which makes the spending even weirder.
Yeah, well, evidently the internal polling. There's a few really interesting questions about this because it's been reported that the internal polling of Biden before he dropped out was like a crazy landslide, way more than what Trump ended up winning by. Like they had him winning like 500 I forget what it was, but it was like a crazy fucking blowout. And then similarly, when Kamala Harris took over, like they knew. But then there's also something interesting where it's like, hey, so like pollsters, could we ever get the real polls? How come like they can figure out the real polls?
Right.
But then because there was something like there's only been a few elections in my life that I remember where like it was just obvious who was going to win. Like Obama in 2008.
Right.
It was obvious.
Right.
You could not have convinced anyone like looks like John McCain's the front runner.
Right.
No, it fucking does not. Like this black Jesus has drawn 80,000 people and then John McCain's over here like, I don't think we can do it's like clearly this guy's losing and this guy's going to win. But the polls reflected that. It was like, oh yeah, Obama's up big in the polls.
Yeah.
But this year, everything you could see, taste, touch, like it was just, obviously Donald Trump. Everywhere Donald Trump went, he's getting like a king's greeting. He's like with all the culture is totally shifted in his direction.
Imagine if they hadn't astroturfed those conventions for Kamala Harris. Imagine if they hadn't paid people to show up. How many people would be there? They'd have an arena.
It would have been, imagine like, right, it wasn't people coming to see Beyonce and they just had to come see Kamala Harris and all, this campaign was the Kamala Harris. And this is part of the reason why, even though I am really upset with Donald Trump, and I'm upset with a lot of the cabinet people too. I mean, look, Bobby, I will say, does seem to at least be doing some real structural, like he's talking about really, changing some things at the health department. I think maybe he could take a break from tweeting about the virus of anti-Semitism, but whatever. Tulsi, I'm really upset with over her like cheering on these strikes. I thought she was supposed to be the one who was going to stand up in that Signal group and say something and not just leave it to JD. And I think Donald Trump's messing up in a lot of ways. But I really, at least at this point, like if he invades Iran and we have another war there, then I will apologize for voting for him. Then I think I made a mistake and I shouldn't have done that. But short of that, I do think it was the right thing to do. And part of it was like that had to be exposed. Because this Kamala Harris ticket, it was the most astroturfed ticket ever.
Yeah.
Like it's one thing. Look, Obama had a lot of institutional support. It wasn't as organic as they made it out to be. You know, like,
But there was a lot of real.
but he had real support.
Yeah.
Like, he did have real grassroots support. She didn't win a primary. She didn't win a delegate when she ran for president. She didn't even make it to Iowa. It was all fake. It was all phony. And it was like, that had to be exposed.
It's dangerous. That's
Yes,
dangerous.
yes.
Because if they can get that through with her, even if you like her and you think she would have done a great job, it's scary that you were given that kind of power.
Yeah.
And the same people that were auto-penning all those Biden executive orders would have been in charge for another 4 years, if not forever.
Yeah, that's right. And look, even, you know, you could say whatever, that Joe Biden just feared that Donald Trump would abuse the Justice Department, which is, you know, a little ironic to accuse him of the thing you're actually guilty of doing. But to go out and to pardon your family, and forget the family even, because that's a little less relevant, but to pardon Fauci and go back to 2014.
Yeah.
Why'd you pick that year?
Yeah.
You know, Joe, I mean, obviously Joe Biden didn't pick anything, but who's the person who picked that we got to go back and give this guy blanket immunity going all the way back? Like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
It's crazy.
It's too much.
It's crazy. And who really signed that? That's the other thing. The thing about using auto pen for writing all those pardons, does that count? Is there a legal battle about that?
Well,
because if you can't remember, if Mike Johnson testifies that he brought up the natural gas deal, and he's like, why'd you go? And he's like, I didn't.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you did. And then he asks to be alone with Mike Johnson. So he always has handlers with him. And then when he's alone with him, then Biden tells him, I didn't sign that.
Yeah.
And then you realize it's the same signature.
Well, when you're the level of senile that Joe Biden was, it's like, it leads to the question, we're like, so how easy was it for everybody to manipulate you?
Also,
because you could just tell him he did or didn't do something, and he may not, you know, like
he doesn't remember.
Well, like, we don't know, you know, like, there was this one thing, look, like, one of the things on October 7th, and I try almost to avoid this topic sometimes because I don't want it to come off like I'm downplaying the horrors of October 7th. Like, Hamas invaded Israel. They did some really fucked up shit. They indiscriminately killed a bunch of civilians, and they had grenades and rifles, and it was horrible. And they took a bunch of hostages, and it's, you know,
everyone knows.
Really, however, there were some claims that were made that turned out not to be true. The 40 beheaded babies and some of the, like, claims of mass rapes and stuff like that just turned out not to be true. They were set in the fog of this thing. Whatever, I'll give the benefit of the doubt of, like, you know, maybe it was, you know, I think they were kind of abused by some politicians in order to get you to turn your brain off and be very emotional and not pay attention to what this response is going to be. But Joe Biden claimed that he had seen the videos of the beheaded babies. And then it turned out to just, like, that never happened. And then you're almost wondering, you're like, was he lying? Does he not remember? Did someone just tell him that you've seen that? And because he's a senile man,
he's
you
also
know?
a liar. Like, his whole life.
Well, that's all. That's right. It's like impossible to know because he's also been a liar his whole life. He's also the guy who's like, I was first in my class, graduated with multiple degrees, and blah blah blah. And you're like, none of this is even kind of true. None of it's even kind of true.
Yeah, and it's just wild that you could be too old and senile to stand trial for having classified documents, but yet you're fine giving out pardons.
Yeah.
Like, how do you let a person with a mental disease give out pardons? That seems like that's the guy I'd manipulate. And if it turns out that guy gives out more pardons than anyone ever upon leaving office.
Yeah.
How's that? That seems like those shouldn't be legit.
Well, look, on its own, of course not. But on its own, that and there were things that come above that to me, like COVID and the war in Ukraine and, you know, a whole bunch of other shit. But that alone is like Kamala Harris and the corporate media and they had to lose.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You can't Emperor's New Clothes the entire American public and, like, fuck it, just lie through your teeth pretending this guy's not a vegetable.
Wow, times, Dave Smith. We got to wrap this up.
All right.
This bitch home. Thank you, sir.
Thank
love you to death. You're awesome.
You too.
Appreciate you very much. Tell everybody how they watch your show.
Oh, part of the problem is my podcast where I talk about all this political news stuff, and then Legion of Skanks is where I'm a degenerate with my comedian friends. Check both of those out. Skankfest is in New Orleans this year. If anyone wants to come, that's going to be a lot of fun. I believe it's September of this year. And then, you know, comicdavesmith.com if you want to come see me on the road.
Beautiful. All right. Bye, everybody.